The auctioneer's gavel hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Mara Vale stood frozen in the dirt yard, rope trembling in her calloused hands, watching strangers bid pennies on the last thing between her daughter and starvation. The milk cow beside her, gentle Daisy, who'd survived 3 drought summers when everything else died, shifted nervously, sensing what Mara couldn't say aloud. This was surrender. 8-year-old Elsie pressed against her mother's worn skirt, silent as always, understanding far too much. Then a voice cut through the crowd, cold, certain, offering a price that made no sense, and everything changed. Thank you for joining this story. Please hit the like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The dust never settled in Red Hollow anymore. It used to, Mara remembered. Back when Thomas was alive, back when the creek still ran year-round and the cottonwoods grew thick along the property line. Back when this town felt like something more than a place people were trying to escape from. Now the wind just moved the dirt around, pushed it from one dying ranch to another, covered everything in a film of grit that worked its way into your teeth, your clothes, your dreams. Mara stood in the auction yard behind the grain supply, one hand gripping the frayed lid rope, the other resting on Elsie's narrow shoulder. The morning sun hammered down despite it being barely past 9. Her daughter didn't complain. Elsie never complained. That worried Mara more than if the girl had screamed and cried like a normal child. Lot 47? The auctioneer called out, voice hoarse from 2 hours of calling numbers. 1 milk cow, Guernsey Cross, approximately 6 years old, healthy udder, good temperament. Who'll start the bidding at $8? Silence. Mara felt her stomach drop. $8 was already robbery. Daisy was worth 20 on a bad day, maybe 30 if you found the right buyer. But desperation had a smell in towns like this, and every man standing in that yard could smell it on her. $6? The auctioneer's eyes swept the crowd. Come on, gentlemen, this is a fine animal. 4, someone called from the back. Mara couldn't see who. Didn't matter. Vultures didn't have names. $4. I have 4. Do I hear 5? A man near the fence spat tobacco juice into the dirt. $4.50, and that's generous. Mara's fingers tightened on the rope. $4.50 wouldn't cover a month of what she owed, not even close. The bank held the first note. Mercer's General Store held another for supplies she'd bought on credit last winter. And then there was Gideon Shaw, whose name people in Red Hollow spoke in the same tone they used for drought and sickness and debt. Shaw didn't hold a note on her property yet. But he would. That was how it worked. That was how it had worked for the Harrisons, the Boone family, the Vandermeers. One by one, the old ranching families sold off their livestock, their equipment, their land. And one by one, Gideon Shaw appeared with cash in hand and sympathy in his voice, offering to take the burden off their shoulders. Then they were gone, sometimes to Denver, sometimes to California, sometimes just gone. And Shaw's holdings grew while Red Hollow shrank. $4.50 going once, the auctioneer said. He looked at Mara, and she saw something like pity cross his weathered face. He didn't want to do this, but he would. Everyone did what they had to. Elsie's hand found Mara's, small fingers threading through hers. The girl's palm was damp with sweat. Mara wanted to say something comforting, wanted to tell her daughter that everything would be all right, that selling Daisy was just temporary, that they'd get another cow when things turned around. But Elsie was 8 years old and already knew the taste of lies. $4.50 going twice, $20. The voice came from somewhere in the middle of the crowd, deep, calm. The kind of voice that didn't need to shout to be heard. Every head turned. A man stood between 2 ranchers Mara vaguely recognized from the North Valley. Tall, maybe 6'1" or 6'2", wearing a dusty brown hat pulled low enough to shadow most of his face. Dark hair curled at his collar. He didn't look like the other men here. Their desperation showed in hunched shoulders and hollowed cheeks. This man stood straight, relaxed, like he'd walked into the auction yard by accident and decided to stay out of mild curiosity. The auctioneer blinked. I'm sorry, did you say $20? The stranger's hand rose, not rushed, just steady. For the cow. A ripple went through the crowd. $20. That was more than fair. That was generous. That was suspicious. Mara's pulse kicked up. She didn't recognize him. And in a town the size of Red Hollow, you knew everyone. If not by name, then by family, by land, by the specific way their ranch had failed or survived. This man was nobody's cousin, nobody's hired hand, nobody. Well, the auctioneer recovered quickly, sensing an opportunity. $20 from the gentleman in the middle. Mighty fine bid. Do I hear 25? Ain't worth 20, the tobacco spitter muttered. But he didn't bid again. Nobody did. You could feel it in the air. That kind of money wasn't normal. Something was off. 20 going once. The auctioneer's gavel rose. 20 going twice. Mara's heart hammered. $20. She could pay Mercer's store. Maybe hold off the bank for another month. Maybe... The gavel fell. Sold. Lot 47 to the gentleman for $20. Applause didn't follow. It never did at desperation auctions. Just a shuffling of feet, a few murmured comments, the quiet sound of another piece of red hollow changing hands. Mara stood frozen. Part of her had hoped, right up until that gavel struck, that nobody would bid at all. That she could walk Daisy home and pretend this whole humiliating morning had been a bad dream. But now it was real. Now a stranger owned the last thing Thomas had left them. The crowd started to shift, men moving on to the next lot. But the stranger didn't move toward the auctioneer's table. Didn't call for his receipt. Instead, he walked directly toward Mara. Up close, she could see his face better. Lean, sun-hardened, probably somewhere in his mid-30s. Eyes the color of winter sky. That pale, sharp blue that cut through everything. A scar ran along his jawline, faded but visible. He stopped 3 feet away, respectful, and tipped his hat. "Ma'am." Mara's throat felt tight. You bought her." "I did." She waited for him to take the rope, to lead Daisy away and leave her standing there with empty hands and $20 that wouldn't be nearly enough. But he didn't move. "She got a name?" he asked. "Daisy." Mara's voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Her name's Daisy." The stranger nodded slowly, looking at the cow with the kind of attention most men didn't give to livestock, like he was actually seeing her. Then his gaze shifted to Elsie, who stared up at him with those 2 old eyes. He touched his hat brim again. "Miss." Elsie didn't respond, just watched him the way she watched everything lately. Quiet. Careful. The stranger reached into his coat pocket. Mara tensed, some animal part of her brain preparing for, what? A weapon? A contract? But he pulled out a worn leather billfold, counted out $20 in bills that looked crisp despite the dust on everything else, and held them toward her. She didn't take them. Couldn't. Because if she took the money, this became real in a way she wasn't ready for. She swallowed. "You're supposed to pay the auctioneer, not me." "I will," he said. "But I figured you'd want to know the count was fair first." Something about the way he said it, not condescending, not pitying, just matter of fact, made Mara's eyes burn. She blinked hard, took the bills. Her hands were shaking. "Thank you," she managed. He nodded. Then he did something that stopped every conversation in a 10-foot radius. He reached down, gently took the rope from her other hand, and placed it back in her palm. His fingers were warm despite the calluses. He closed her hand around the frayed hemp and stepped back. "I bought her so you wouldn't have to lose her." The words hung in the air between them. Simple. Impossible. True. Mara stared at him, at the rope in her hand, at Daisy, who was somehow still hers. Her mind couldn't process it fast enough. This didn't happen. Men didn't spend $20 on a cow just to give it back. Men didn't... "I don't understand," she whispered. "You don't have to." His voice was quiet, kind. "She's yours. But the money is mine to spend how I see fit." People were watching now. The auctioneer had paused mid-sentence on the next lot. Even the tobacco spitter had stopped moving, jaw slack. Elsie's hand tightened in Mara's, and when Mara looked down, her daughter's eyes were wide. Surprised. Almost hopeful. That look scared Mara more than anything, because hope was dangerous. Hope got you hurt. "Who are you?" Mara asked. The stranger settled his hat lower. "Name's Colter Ridge, just passing through. Nobody passes through Red Hollow." The words came out sharper than Mara intended. "There's nothing here to pass through to." A flicker of something crossed his face. Amusement, maybe, or recognition. "Fair point. So why..." Mara Vale. The new voice cut through like a knife through butter, smooth, confident, wrong. Mara's spine went rigid. She knew that voice. Everyone in Red Hollow knew that voice. Gideon Shaw walked toward them through the parting crowd, moving with the easy grace of a man who'd never worried about where his next meal was coming from. He wore a black suit despite the heat, not a speck of dust on him. Dark hair slicked back, mustache trimmed precise. 40 years old and handsome in the way that made women look twice and men look away first. He smiled at Mara. It didn't reach his eyes. "Quite the bidding war we had there," Shaw said lightly, "though I'm confused about the outcome. Did you sell the cow, or—" He trailed off, gaze sliding to Colter. "She's mine," Mara said. Her voice surprised her with its steadiness. "I see." Shaw's smile thinned. He looked at Colter fully now, sizing him up the way a predator sizes up something that might be competition or might be prey. "And you are?" "Just passing through," Colter said. Shaw's eyes narrowed slightly. "Well, that's mighty charitable of you, Mr. Ridge." "Mr. Ridge." Shaw drew out the name like he was tasting it. "Though I have to say, I'm not sure Red Hollow is the kind of place that benefits from charity. Tends to give people false hope. Make them think they can hold on to things that are already slipping away." The threat in those words was subtle, but it was there. Mara's stomach twisted. She should walk away. Take Daisy and Elsie and get out of this yard before Shaw decided to take an interest in whatever just happened. But her feet wouldn't move. Colter tilted his head slightly. "You always talk about people like they're not standing right in front of you?" The air went tight. Shaw's smile froze. Around them, conversation stopped. The auctioneer went silent mid-sentence. Even the wind seemed to pause. Nobody spoke to Gideon Shaw like that. Not in Red Hollow. Not anywhere Shaw had power. For a long moment, Shaw just stared at Colter. Then he laughed. It sounded genuine, but Mara had heard that laugh before. Right before he'd offered to help the Vandermeers by buying their land at a quarter of its value. "I like you," Shaw said. "You've got spine. That's rare." He stepped closer, and Mara saw Colter's shoulders shift, not backing down, just ready. But spine breaks just like anything else when enough pressure gets applied. So, here's some free advice, stranger. Red Hollow has its own way of doing things, its own rhythms, and folks who try to disrupt that rhythm tend to find themselves uncomfortable real fast. "That a threat?" Colter asked mildly. "An observation." Shaw's eyes glittered. "You said you're just passing through, so pass through. Don't get tangled up in things that aren't your concern." Colter didn't respond, just held Shaw's gaze, steady and unblinking, until Shaw's smile tightened at the edges. "Mara," Shaw said, still looking at Colter, "you need anything. You know where to find me. My door's always open." "I'm fine," Mara said. Her voice came out stronger than she felt. "For now." Shaw tipped his hat, mocking politeness. "Enjoy your cow." He walked away, and it felt like the whole yard exhaled. Mara's legs trembled. She wanted to sit down, wanted to throw up, wanted to grab Elsie and run until Red Hollow was a memory behind them. "You shouldn't have done that," she told Colter. "Talking to him like that." "Probably not," Colter agreed. "He'll make trouble for you." "He already was." Mara blinked. "What?" But Colter was looking past her, his gaze tracking Shaw's retreating form. His expression had changed. Still calm, but colder. Like he was seeing something Mara couldn't. "You should get home," he said quietly. "Keep your daughter close." Fear spiked through her. "Why? What did you—" "Just a feeling." His eyes came back to hers. "You got people you trust? Neighbors?" "The Carters, half a mile north." "Good. Stay near them for a while." He touched his hat brim. "Ma'am. Miss." He started to turn away. "Wait." Mara's voice surprised her. Colter paused. "I need to know why. Why you did that. Why you gave her back." He was quiet for a moment, then, "Because someone should have done it for me once, and nobody did." Before Mara could respond, he walked away, disappearing into the crowd like he'd never been there at all. Elsie tugged on Mara's hand. When Mara looked down, her daughter's face was tilted up, serious and searching. "Mama? Is he a good man?" Mara watched Colter's hat vanish beyond the stock pins. I don't know, baby. But he helped us. Yeah. Mara's throat tightened. He did. So maybe, Elsie bit her lip. Maybe things can get better? The question broke Mara's heart, because she didn't have an answer. Didn't know if things could get better. Didn't know if this strange act of kindness was real or just the calm before something worse. All she knew was that Daisy was still hers. And for the first time in 6 months, she had $20 in her pocket that wasn't already spent. Come on, Mara said softly. Let's go home. Husk. They took the long way back to avoid passing Shaw's land. The road added an extra mile, but Mara didn't care. She needed time to think, to breathe, to figure out what the hell just happened. Elsie walked beside her, one hand wrapped around Daisy's lead rope, the other swinging free. The cow plodded along peacefully, unbothered by the drama of the morning. Lucky thing, Mara thought. Being a cow. No bills to pay. No decisions to make. Just grass and water and the simple rhythm of existence. The Vale Ranch came into view as they crested the low ridge. It looked worse every time Mara saw it. The barn leaned to the left, its roof patched with mismatched boards. The house needed paint, needed repairs, needed everything Mara couldn't afford to give it. The fence line sagged in places. Weeds grew thick in what used to be Thomas's vegetable garden. 3 years since the fever took him. 3 years of Mara trying to hold together something that wanted to fall apart. She'd managed, barely. Sold the horses first, Thomas's pride. 2 beautiful quarter horses he'd spent years training. Then the chickens when feed got too expensive. Then the plow. Then the wagon. Piece by piece, watching their life get smaller. Daisy had been the last thing, and now, somehow, she was still here. Mama? Elsie's voice pulled Mara from her thoughts. Can we give Daisy extra hay tonight? Maybe a little? Because she almost got sold? Because she's a good cow. They put Daisy in this barn, made sure she had water, scattered some of their precious hay supply. Mara's hands moved through the familiar motions while her mind spun in circles. Colter Ridge. The name meant nothing to her, but the way he'd looked at Shaw, that meant something. That was the look of a man who'd seen Shaw's type before. Maybe been hurt by them. Because someone should have done it for me once, and nobody did. What did that mean? Mama, I'm hungry. Mara looked down at Elsie. The girl's face was smudged with dust, her dress too short in the sleeves because she'd grown since last winter and there was no money for new clothes. When had her daughter gotten so thin? Let's see what we've got, Mara said. The house was hot despite the open windows. Mara pumped water from the well outside. Thank God it hadn't gone dry yet, and started a fire in the stove. They had cornmeal, some salt pork that was mostly salt at this point, half a loaf of bread from 2 days ago. She made Johnny cakes and sliced the bread thin, set out 2 plates, poured water into tin cups, a feast by Red Hollow standards. Elsie ate slowly, deliberately, making each bite last. Mara watched her daughter and felt the familiar ache of inadequacy. 8 years old and already rationing food like a soldier, already knowing not to ask for seconds. You did good today, Mara said. At the auction, being so brave. Elsie shrugged, took another small bite of Johnny cake. You scared? Mara asked. Of what? Everything. Elsie considered this seriously. Sometimes, but you're here. So it's okay. The simple faith in those words made Mara want to cry. Because she didn't feel okay, didn't feel capable of protecting anyone. She was 29 years old and drowning, but she couldn't say that. So she just smiled and brushed a strand of hair from Elsie's forehead. We're going to be all right, Mara lied. After lunch, Elsie went outside to play, or what passed for play these days, which mostly involved sitting on the porch steps and watching the horizon. Mara cleared the dishes and pulled out the ledger she kept in the kitchen drawer. $20. She wrote it down carefully, the number looking almost obscene next to all the debts listed above it. Mercer's General Store, $17.50. Banknote, $35, 2 months overdue. Property tax, $12. The $20 covered Mercer's with change left over, but the bank, that was the real problem. The bank could take the property if she defaulted, could auction it off just like they'd auctioned Daisy. And Shaw would be right there, cash in hand, ready to add another piece to his empire. Mara closed the ledger, pressed her palms against the rough wood of the table, tried not to scream. A knock at the door made her jump. She crossed the small kitchen, heart already racing. Knew instinctively it wasn't good news. Good news didn't knock in the middle of the afternoon. Colter Ridge stood on her porch, hat in hand. Up close, in full daylight, Mara could see more details. The way his shirt was worn but clean, the careful way he held himself like a man used to being ready for trouble. That scar on his jaw looked like it had come from something sharp. "Mr. Ridge," Mara said. Her voice came out formal, wary. "Ma'am, I apologize for the intrusion, but I need to talk to you about Gideon Shaw." Mara's stomach dropped. "I don't—" "Please." He met her eyes. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Elsie appeared at Mara's elbow, peering around her mother at the stranger. Colter acknowledged her with a slight nod. "Miss Elsie." The girl blinked, surprised he remembered her name. Mara hadn't given it. Against every instinct screaming at her to shut the door, Mara stepped back. "Come in." The house was small. Colter had to duck slightly under the doorframe. He stood just inside, not presuming to sit, still holding his hat. His eyes swept the room. Not judging, Mara thought, just cataloging. The way someone looks at a place when they're trying to understand it. "Coffee?" Mara offered, because manners were manners even when you were terrified. "No, thank you, ma'am." "Then talk." Colter glanced at Elsie. "Maybe the young lady, ici—" "She stays." Mara's voice was firm. "Anything you got to say, she'll hear eventually anyway. Better for me." He nodded slowly. Respect flickered in those pale blue eyes. "All right, then." He turned the hat in his hands. "How long has Shaw been operating in Red Hollow?" "What do you mean, operating?" "Buying up land, making offers to struggling ranchers." "How long?" Mara frowned. "I don't know. 3 years? 4? He came from somewhere east, said he wanted to invest in the valley. People were grateful at first, thought he'd bring money in, but he didn't." "No." Mara crossed her arms. "He took money out, bought cheap, sold cheaper somewhere else, kept the land. Now he owns maybe a third of the valley, and the families who used to work it are gone." "Where'd they go?" "Some said Denver, some said California, some—" She trailed off. "Some folks just disappeared, signed papers one day, and by the next week their houses were empty." Colter's jaw tightened. "And nobody questioned it?" "Who's going to question a man with that kind of money? Sheriff's been on Shaw's payroll since he got here. Town council, too, most likely. You don't bite the hand that feeds." "Even when that hand is choking you?" Mara flinched. "Because, yeah, that's exactly what it felt like." Colter set his hat on the table carefully, pulled a folded paper from inside his coat. He smoothed it out on the table, but a map of some kind, hand-drawn, with locations marked in pencil. "Garrison," he said, pointing to a mark on the western edge. "Little town, maybe 50 families. Shaw arrived 4 years ago, started buying land. Within 18 months, 40 of those families were gone. Properties consolidated. Then he moved on." His finger traced east. Stillwater Junction, same pattern, 3 years ago. 30 families displaced. Then Copper Ridge, then Red Hollow. Mara stared at the map, at the trail of dead towns leading straight to her door. "How do you know this?" she whispered. Colter's expression went cold, distant. "Because Garrison was my home. My family's ranch was there, 5th generation. We had 300 acres, good water, strong herd." "Had?" "Shaw wanted it, made an offer. My father refused. So Shaw manufactured a debt, forged documents saying we'd borrowed money we never touched. When we couldn't pay what we didn't owe, he took us to court. Judge was in his pocket. We lost everything." Mara's breath caught. "Your family scattered. Pa died within the year. Heart gave out. Ma's living with my sister in Kansas City, last I heard. My brother—" Colter's voice roughened. He took it hard. Drank himself to death in a mining camp somewhere in Colorado. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be careful." He looked up at her. "Shaw's not a businessman. He's a predator. And this valley is just his next feeding ground. You understand what I'm telling you?" Mara felt Elsie press against her side. She put an arm around her daughter automatically. "Why are you telling me this?" Because you stood in that auction yard today, and I saw the same look my mother had, that desperate, cornered look. And I thought, maybe this time I can do something. Maybe this time I don't just watch it happen. So what? You bought my cow out of guilt? I bought your cow because Shaw was counting on you being too broken to fight. He wants you desperate. Wants you backed into a corner with no options. That cow, keeping her, that gives you a choice, even a small one. Mara's mind was reeling. And what exactly am I supposed to fight with? I got no money, no influence, no— You got the truth, Colter interrupted. And if enough people hear it, that's something Shaw can't buy. People in Red Hollow don't want to hear the truth. They want to survive. Then help them survive. Organize. Push back. There's strength in numbers. Mara laughed bitterly. You don't know this town. Everyone's too scared, too tired, too much like you? The words stung. Mara's hands clenched. You got no right. I got every right. Colter's voice was hard now. I watched my family die because nobody would stand up, because everyone was too scared, too tired, too beaten down, and I swore if I ever got another chance to stop it, I would. So here I am, asking you, begging you, don't let Red Hollow become garrison. Silence filled the small kitchen. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose window pane. Elsie's breathing was shallow against Mara's ribs. What do you want from me? Mara asked finally. Nothing yet. Just be ready. When the time comes, be ready to fight. And when's that going to be? Colter picked up his hat. Soon. Shaw doesn't like loose ends, and I just became one. He moved toward the door, then paused, looked at Elsie. You're a brave girl. Your mama's lucky to have you. Elsie didn't answer, just watched him with those serious eyes. At the door, Colter turned back. One more thing. You get any visitors? Anyone offering help, offering to buy something, offering anything, you tell them no. And you come find me. I'm staying at the boarding house on 3rd Street. Why would I? Because Shaw's next move is to isolate you. Make sure you got nobody to turn to. He'll send someone friendly, someone sympathetic, someone who seems like they're trying to help. Don't trust it. Then he was gone, striding across the dusty yard toward a horse Mara hadn't noticed before. A rangy gray gelding tied to her fence. Mara stood in the doorway, watching him ride away, her mind spinning. Elsie tugged her sleeve. Mama? Is what he said true? I don't know, baby. Are we going to fight? Mara looked down at her daughter, at the trust in those eyes, at the hope that shouldn't be there but was anyway. I don't know, she whispered. But in her chest, something small and dangerous was stirring, something that felt uncomfortably like anger. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She lay in the narrow bed she used to share with Thomas, staring at the ceiling beams he'd cut and fitted himself. Moonlight slanted through the gap in the curtains, painting silver lines across the worn floorboards. In the next room, Elsie's breathing was soft and even. The girl could sleep through anything, always had been able to. Even the night Thomas died, even with Mara sobbing in the kitchen, Elsie had slept. Mara envied her that. Her mind kept circling back to Colter Ridge, to his map with its trail of destroyed towns, to the look in his eyes when he'd talked about his family. That wasn't the look of a man lying. That was the look of someone who'd lost everything and was still angry about it. But anger didn't pay bills, didn't fix broken fence lines, or keep the bank from foreclosing. Anger was a luxury Mara couldn't afford. She rolled onto her side, pulled the thin blanket up to her chin. The house creaked around her. Settling sounds. Nothing sinister. Just old wood adjusting to the temperature drop. She should sleep. Morning came early, and there was work to do. Always work to do. But sleep wouldn't come. Around 3 a.m, she gave up, slipped out of bed, pulled a shawl over her nightdress, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. Lit a candle. The flame guttered, then steadied. She opened the ledger again, even though she'd memorized every number already. $20 minus $17.50 for Mercer's left $2.50. Not even enough to make a dent in the banknote. She'd need another $32.50 to cover what she owed, and that didn't account for next month's payment. Or the month after that. The math didn't work. It never worked. Mara closed the ledger harder than necessary. The slap of leather on wood was satisfying for about half a second, then just made her feel childish. A sound outside froze her mid-breath. Hoofbeats. Coming up the road fast. Mara blew out the candle, plunging the kitchen into darkness. Her heart hammered. She moved to the window, staying back from the glass, and peered out into the moonlit yard. Two riders, both moving with purpose, not the lazy gait of someone just passing through. They reined up near the barn, dismounted. Even in silhouette, Mara could see they were armed. Rifle stocks jutted from saddle scabbards. She grabbed the shotgun Thomas had kept behind the door, checked it by feel. Both barrels loaded. Her hands shook. She'd never fired at a person before. Didn't know if she could. But the weight of the gun was reassuring anyway. The men approached the house. One tall, one stockier. Their boots crunched on the gravel. They were talking, voices low but not whispering, confident, like they had every right to be there. Mara's breath came shallow. Should she wake Elsie? Hide her? What if they... A knock at the door. Loud. Deliberate. Mrs. Vale? A man's voice, unfamiliar. Mrs. Vale, we need to talk to you. Mara stayed silent, grip tightening on the shotgun. We know you're in there, ma'am. Saw your candle. A pause. We're not here to cause trouble. We work for Mr. Shaw. He sent us to check on you. Shaw. Of course. It's 3 a.m, Mara called through the door. Her voice was steadier than she felt. Whatever Mr. Shaw wants can wait till daylight. Afraid it can't, ma'am. See, there's been some concerns raised about that transaction at the auction today. Mr. Shaw wants to make sure you're not being taken advantage of. I'm fine. With respect, ma'am, that's not for you to decide alone. Mr. Shaw has a vested interest in the welfare of folks in this valley. Now, we can talk through the door, or you can open up and we can have a civilized conversation. Your choice. Mara glanced toward Elsie's room, still quiet. Good. What concerns? She asked. Well, for starters, the stranger who bought your cow then gave it back. That strike you as normal behavior? Struck me as kind. Or suspicious. The voice hardened slightly. Man like that doesn't do favors without expecting something in return. Mr. Shaw thinks you might be getting yourself mixed up in something you don't understand. Tell Mr. Shaw I appreciate his concern, but my business is my own. Silence. Then the sound of boots shifting. The stockier man spoke for the first time, voice rougher. You always this stubborn, lady. Go away, Mara said flatly. See, that's the problem. The first man again. You're not thinking clearly. Stress does that to people. Makes them make bad decisions. Accept help from the wrong folks. Now, Mr. Shaw is prepared to make you an offer, a generous one, for your property, cash money. Enough to get you and your little girl somewhere better, somewhere with opportunity. Mara's stomach turned. I'm not selling. You haven't heard the offer yet. Don't need to. This land was my husband's. Now it's mine and my daughter's. We're staying. A longer pause. When the first man spoke again, his tone had shifted. Still polite, but colder. That's a real shame, Mrs. Vale, because Mr. Shaw don't like to see folks struggle, especially widows with children. Accidents happen to people who struggle too long. Tragic things. The threat was clear enough. Mara raised the shotgun, aimed it at the door. You threatening me on my own property? Just expressing concern, ma'am. But since you're being unreasonable, we'll be on our way. You have yourself a good night, and think about what we said. Mr. Shaw's offer won't stay on the table forever. The footsteps retreated. Mara stayed at the window watching until the men mounted and rode back toward town. Only when the hoofbeats faded completely did she lower the shotgun. Her arms ached from holding it steady. Behind her, a small voice. Mama? Mara spun. Elsie stood in her nightdress, hair tangled from sleep, eyes wide. It's okay, baby. Just some men. They're gone now. Were they bad men? Mara wanted to lie. Wanted to say no, just a misunderstanding, nothing to worry about. But Elsie deserved better than lies. Yeah, Mara said quietly. They were bad men. Elsie crossed to her mother, wrapped thin arms around Mara's waist. Mr. Ridge said to be careful. He did. He was right. Mara stroked her daughter's hair. Looks like... They stood like that for a long moment. Then Elsie pulled back, looked up with those two serious eyes. Are we going to go find him, Mr. Ridge? In the morning. You promise? Mara hesitated. Making promises felt dangerous, but looking at her daughter's face, she couldn't refuse. I promise. Elsie nodded, satisfied. Okay. Can I sleep in your bed tonight? Yeah, baby, come on. They climbed into bed together, Elsie curling against Mara's side like she used to when she was smaller. Mara held her close, listening to the house settle, waiting for dawn. She didn't sleep at all. Morning came gray and hot. Mara rose before the sun fully cleared the horizon, made breakfast from the last of the cornmeal, got Elsie dressed. The girl didn't complain, didn't ask questions, just moved through the routine with the quiet efficiency of someone twice her age. They took Daisy to the pasture, made sure the fence gate was secure, then started the walk into town. 2 miles on foot. Mara had sold the wagon months ago. She carried the shotgun across her back, not hidden. Let anyone who saw them know she was armed. The boarding house on 3rd Street was a sagging 2-story structure that had probably been white once. Now it was the color of old bone, paint peeling in long strips. A sign out front read, "Rooms, clean beds, no credit," in faded letters. Mara climbed the steps, Elsie behind her. The front door stood open to catch any breeze. Inside, the hallway smelled of bacon grease and tobacco. A woman in a stained apron emerged from what looked like a kitchen. Help you? I'm looking for Colter Ridge. He said he was staying here. The woman's eyes narrowed. You, Law? Do I look like Law? A snort. Fair point. Room 4, upstairs. Though he ain't in there right now. Where is he? How should I know? I rent rooms, not track boarders. The woman jerked her thumb toward the back. Try the stable. Saw him heading that way earlier. Mara nodded thanks and led Elsie around the side of the building. The stable was a lean-to affair, barely standing, but it kept the sun off 4 horses. Colter's gray stood in the 3rd stall, already saddled. Colter himself was checking the cinch, movements economical and practiced. He looked up as they approached, no surprise on his face, like he'd been expecting them. Mrs. Vale? Elsie. They came last night, Mara said without preamble. 2 of them, around 3 in the morning, said they work for Shaw. Colter's hands stilled on the saddle leather. What'd they want? To scare me. It worked. They threaten you. Not directly, just suggested accidents happen to stubborn widows. Mara's voice was bitter. Real concerned for my welfare they were. Colter's jaw tightened. He turned fully to face her. You armed when they showed up? Had Thomas's shotgun. Good. You know how to use it? Well enough. Might need to get better than well enough. He glanced at Elsie, then back at Mara. Shaw's moving faster than I thought. That's bad. Bad how? Means he sees you as a threat. Or sees me as one, and you're the easiest way to get to me. Mara's stomach dropped. I didn't ask for any of this. I know. So what am I supposed to do? Just wait for them to come back? Wait for something worse? Colter was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small pistol. A Derringer, nickel-plated, small enough to fit in a pocket. He held it out to Mara. You know how to use one of these? Mara stared at the gun. I can't. You can, and you will. It's loaded. 2 shots, point and squeeze. Don't think about it, just do it. Keep it on you at all times. I have the shotgun. Shotgun's not much use if someone gets close. This is for close. He pushed the gun into her hand, closed her fingers around it. The metal was cool against her palm. I mean it, Mrs. Vale. Keep it on you. Someone comes at you or your daughter. You don't hesitate. You understand? Mara nodded numbly. The Derringer felt heavy, final. Elsie tugged Mara's skirt. Mama, are we in danger? No, baby, Mara lied, then to Colter. What are you going to do? Talk to some folks. See if anyone else has been pressured. See if Shaw's made similar offers. He paused. You know the Harrisons? Family that used to ranch north of here? They left 2 years ago. They leave? Or did they get pushed? Mara thought back. There was talk. Debt, mostly. Then Shaw bought their land and they were gone within a week. Anyone stay in touch with them? No, nobody knows where they went. Mara frowned. Why? Because I'm starting to think the folks who left didn't leave at all. The implication hung in the air. Mara felt cold despite the morning heat. You think Shaw... She couldn't finish the sentence. Not with Elsie right there. Colter's expression was grim. I think Shaw's been operating unchecked for too long, and people who operate unchecked get sloppy, get confident, start taking bigger risks. That's not proof, no, but it's a pattern, and patterns mean something. He gathered the gray's reins. You got somewhere safe you can go? Someone who'd take you and your girl in for a few days? The Carters, maybe, but I can't just abandon my property. Your property won't do you much good if you're dead. The bluntness of it made Mara flinch. But he was right. She knew he was right. How long? She asked. Few days, maybe a week. I need time to dig, talk to people, figure out how deep this goes. Colter swung into the saddle. The gray shifted, ready to move. Stay low, stay armed, and don't trust anyone who comes offering help. Shaw's got people everywhere. Where are you going? Stillwater Junction? Town Shaw hit before Red Hollow. If I'm right, there'll be records. Maybe witnesses. He looked down at her, and for a moment something like sympathy crossed his face. I know this isn't what you wanted, but you're in it now. Both of us are. Because you bought a cow. Because someone had to do something. He tipped his hat. I'll be back in 3 days. You need me before then. Leave word at the boarding house. Mrs. Chen will know where to find me. The woman in the apron? That's her tough old bird, doesn't scare easy. You can trust her. Then he was riding off, the gray's hooves kicking up dust. Mara watched until he disappeared around the corner toward the main road. The derringer in her pocket felt like it weighed 10 pounds. Elsie slipped her hand into Mara's. Mama, what's happening? I don't know, baby. Mara squeezed her daughter's fingers. But we're going to figure it out. They didn't go straight home. Instead, Mara led Elsie to Mercer's general store. Might as well pay off that debt while she still had the money. The store sat on the corner of Main and 2nd, a sprawling wooden building that sold everything from flour to fabric to ammunition. Silas Mercer stood behind the counter, a thin man in his 50s with spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He looked up as Mara entered, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite hostile, but not friendly either. Mrs. Vale. Mr. Mercer. Mara pulled out the money, counted out $17.50, slid it across the counter. For my account? Mercer looked at the money like it might bite him. That's very prompt of you. It's what I owe. Yes, of course. He didn't touch the bills, just stared at them. Can I ask where you came by this? It's just, I heard about the auction yesterday. Heard you sold your cow. Then you heard wrong. I kept her. But the money, is mine. And legal. Now mark my account paid, please. Mercer's jaw worked. Finally, he picked up the money, counted it again, made a notation in his ledger. His handwriting was cramped and careful. There. Paid in full. Though, he hesitated. Though I should tell you, Mrs. Vale, I had a visitor this morning. Mr. Shaw. Mara's spine went straight. What did he want? Asked about your account. Wanted to know how much you owed. I told him I couldn't share customer information, but Mercer looked uncomfortable. But he knows. He knows about everyone's debts. Has for months. He's been keeping track. That legal? Legal enough if you got the sheriff in your pocket. Mercer lowered his voice. Look, I don't want trouble. I got a business to run. But you should know, and Shaw's been talking to every merchant in town, offering to buy out debts, says he's trying to help folks. But the ones who take his help, he shook his head. They don't stay long. The Harrisons? Among others, Shaw paid off their debts to me, to the bank, to everyone. Then he owned them, and then they were gone. Mercer took off his glasses, cleaned them on his shirt. I'm telling you this because your husband was a good man. Helped me fix my roof 2 summers ago, wouldn't take payment, so I'm repaying the favor. Whatever you're planning, be careful. Shaw doesn't lose, not in this town. Mara absorbed this. He came to my house last night, sent men. Mercer's face paled. Then you're already on his list. You need to get out, Mrs. Vale. Take your daughter and go. And give him my land? Better to lose land than your life. That land is all I have. It's all Elsie will have. Won't do her much good if you're in the ground. The same argument Colter had made. Mara was tired of hearing it. I appreciate the warning, Mr. Mercer, but I'm not running. Then you're a fool. Maybe. Probably. But Mara couldn't bring herself to care. She took Elsie's hand and walked out of the store into the harsh morning sun. The main street of Red Hollow was busier now. Wagons rolled past, kicking up dust. Men gathered outside the saloon despite the early hour. Women hurried between shops, heads down, not making eye contact. The whole town felt tense, like everyone was waiting for something to break. Mara noticed people watching her. Whispers followed in her wake. News traveled fast in small towns, and the auction yesterday had been unusual enough to fuel gossip. Add in Colter's confrontation with Shaw, and Mara was now officially interesting, which was the last thing she needed. "Mama, people are staring," Elsie whispered. "Let them." They passed the sheriff's office. Through the window, Mara could see Sheriff Drummond at his desk, feet propped up, reading a newspaper. Fat and lazy and bought. Everyone knew it. Nobody said it aloud. At the edge of town, near where the road split toward the Carter Ranch, a man stepped into their path. Mara stopped. Her hand went to her pocket, fingers closing around the derringer. The man was young, maybe 25, with a nervous smile. He held up his hands quickly. "Mrs. Vale, I don't mean no harm. I wanted to talk to you." "About what?" "About yesterday. About what that stranger did, buying your cow and giving it back." The young man glanced around, making sure nobody was close enough to hear. "That was something, really something." "It was kind," Mara said carefully. "It was more than that. It was—" He struggled for words. "It was the first time in years I seen someone in this town do something that wasn't about survival. It was about what's right." Mara studied him, recognized him now. Danny Fletcher, worked at the livery stable. His family used to have a spread east of town before Shaw bought them out. "What do you want, Mr. Fletcher?" "I want to know if it's true. What folks are saying, that the stranger's planning to go after Shaw." "I don't know what he's planning." "But he stood up to him. At the auction. I saw it. We all saw it." Danny's voice dropped. "Look, my family lost everything to Shaw. We didn't want to sell, but he made it impossible to stay. And I've been thinking, maybe if someone finally pushed back, really pushed back, others would too. Strength in numbers, right?" Mara felt a flutter of something in her chest. "Hope? Fear? Both?" "You saying you want to fight Shaw?" she asked quietly. "I'm saying maybe it's time someone did, and maybe that stranger's the one to lead it. But he's going to need help, local help, people who know the town, know Shaw's operation." Danny met her eyes. "Is he someone we can trust?" "I don't know him well enough to say. But you trust him enough to let him buy your cow. He gave it back." "Exactly." Danny's nervous smile widened. "So maybe he's what he seems. Maybe he's actually trying to help. Or maybe he's got his own agenda, and we're all just pieces in it. Maybe. But what's the alternative? Keep our heads down? Keep letting Shaw take and take until there's nothing left?" Danny shook his head. "I can't do that anymore, Mrs. Vale. I'm tired of being scared. And I think a lot of other folks are too. They just need someone to stand up first." Before Mara could respond, a shout cut through the morning air. "Fire! Fire at the Carter place!" Mara's blood went cold. She turned toward the sound, saw smoke rising in the distance. Black and thick, too much to be a cooking fire. Danny was already running toward the livery, yelling for horses. Mara grabbed Elsie. "Come on, run!" They ran. The Carter Ranch was half a mile out, but the smoke was visible long before they reached it. Other people were running too, men with buckets, women with children. The universal fear of frontier life, fire could spread fast, especially in drought conditions. One ranch could become 3, could become the whole valley. By the time Mara reached the Carter's property, chaos had taken over. The barn was fully engulfed, flames licking at the sky. The house was still standing, but sparks were landing on the roof. John Carter and his 2 sons worked frantically with buckets from the well, throwing water that seemed to evaporate before it hit the wood. Danny Fletcher was organizing a bucket line. Other men were trying to move livestock away from the flames. The heat was incredible, pushing everyone back. Mara scanned the crowd for Sarah Carter, John's wife. Found her near the house, clutching her youngest daughter, face streaked with tears and soot. "Sarah!" Mara pushed through the crowd. "Are you hurt?" Sarah shook her head. "We're okay. We got out, but the barn—" She dissolved into sobs. Everything was in there. The feed, the equipment, all of it. How did it start? I don't know. John was in the house. I was doing laundry. Next thing I know, the barn's burning. Mara looked at the flames, thought about the men who'd come to her house last night. Shaw's men. She felt sick. "Sarah," she said slowly, "have you had any visitors lately? Anyone asking about your land?" Sarah's tear-stained face went pale. "How did you—" "Yes, 2 days ago. Man from Shaw's office said Shaw was interested in buying. John told him no. We've been here 20 years, raised our children here. We're not selling." Her voice cracked. "You think—" "I think you need to be careful." The fire burned for another hour before they got it under control. The barn was a total loss. So was everything inside it. John Carter stood in front of the smoking ruins, face blank with shock. His sons sat on the ground nearby, exhausted. The crowd started to disperse as evening approached. But Mara noticed something. People were talking in small groups, whispering, shooting glances toward town, toward where Shaw's big house sat on the hill overlooking Red Hollow. Danny Fletcher appeared at Mara's elbow. This wasn't an accident. No. This was a message. For the Carters. For anyone thinking about saying no to Shaw. Probably. "So what are we going to do about it?" Mara looked at him, at his young face full of anger and determination, looked at the other men and women standing in the Carter yard, covered in soot, exhausted, frightened, looked at Elsie, who hadn't left her side all afternoon. "I don't know yet," she said honestly, "but something. We're going to do something." Danny nodded. "I'll spread the word. Folks who are tired of being scared. Tell them to be ready." "Ready for what?" "Whatever comes next." He walked away, already talking to a group of younger men near the ruined barn. Mara watched him go, feeling the weight of what was building. This was bigger than her now. Bigger than one cow, one auction, one stranger's act of kindness. This was Red Hollow finally reaching its breaking point. Sarah Carter approached, wiping her face. "Mara, can you and Elsie stay for supper? It's the least I can do after you helped. We need to get home before dark. Then take some food with you." Sarah pressed a cloth-wrapped bundle into Mara's hands. "Bread and cheese, please." Mara accepted it, hugged Sarah. "You're going to be okay, we all are." Sarah's laugh was hollow. "You really believe that?" "I have to." Jeez. The walk home felt longer than usual. Elsie was silent, processing. Mara's mind wouldn't stop spinning. The fire wasn't random. Shaw was escalating, squeezing harder, and Colter was gone for 3 more days. 3 days felt like forever. As they crested the ridge overlooking their property, Mara stopped. Something was wrong. She could feel it before she could see it. The front door of the house stood open. Mara's hand went to the derringer. "Elsie, stay behind me." They approached slowly. The yard was empty. No horses, no signs of forced entry, but the door definitely hadn't been left open. Mara was meticulous about that. She pushed the door wider with her foot, the derringer raised. The house was dim inside, but nothing looked disturbed. The kitchen was exactly as she'd left it. Elsie's room was untouched. Then Mara saw it. On the kitchen table, weighted down with a rock, was a single piece of paper. Her hand shook as she picked it up. The handwriting was elegant, the kind learned in expensive schools back east. "Mrs. Vale, I regret that our previous conversation was cut short. I had hoped we might discuss your situation in a more civilized manner. However, I understand that stress can make people unreasonable. Please consider this a final offer, $500 for your property, livestock included. This is more than fair given the condition of your land and your outstanding debts. The offer expires in 1 week. After that, I cannot guarantee your safety or the safety of your daughter. Think carefully." Your friend and neighbor, Gideon Shaw Mara, read it twice, then a third time. The threat was clear. The timeline was clear. 1 week to surrender everything or face consequences. She looked at Elsie, who was watching her with those serious eyes. "What does it say, Mama?" Mara crumpled the letter. "Nothing important." But they both knew that was a lie. That night, Mara barricaded the door and slept with the shotgun across her lap. Elsie curled beside her, and neither of them mentioned being afraid. But when morning came, Mara's decision was made. She wasn't running, she wasn't selling, and when Colter Ridge came back, she was going to tell him exactly what she'd decided. Red Hollow was going to fight. 3 days felt like 3 months. Mara spent them in a state of constant vigilance, jumping at every sound, checking the windows every hour. She kept Elsie close, kept the shotgun closer. At night, she slept in shifts, 2 hours awake, 2 hours of fitful dozing, always listening. The Derringer stayed in her pocket even when she washed. The weight of it had become familiar, almost comforting. On the second day, she walked into town to check with Mrs. Chen at the boarding house. No word from Colter. The old woman's face was unreadable, but she told Mara to come back tomorrow. Same time. On the third day, Mara found Danny Fletcher waiting outside her property at dawn. He wasn't alone. 3 other men stood with him, farmers and ranch hands she recognized from around the valley. They looked nervous but determined. "Mrs. Vale," Danny said, "we've been talking about Shaw, about what happened to the Carters, about what's been happening for years." He glanced at the others. "We want to help. Whatever you're planning, we're in." Mara studied their faces. Young men, mostly. Old enough to remember when their families had land, when Red Hollow wasn't a dying town controlled by one man's greed. Too young to have given up hope completely. "I'm not planning anything," she said carefully. "I'm waiting. For the stranger, Colter Ridge?" "Yes. And if he doesn't come back?" The question hung there. Mara had been asking herself the same thing for 3 days. What if Colter had decided Red Hollow wasn't worth the trouble? What if he'd found what he needed in Stillwater Junction and just kept riding? What if she was placing her faith in a man she barely knew, and that faith was about to get people killed? "Then I'll figure something else out," she said finally. Danny nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But when he gets back, you tell him we're ready. Tell him there's at least a dozen of us. Maybe more if people stop being scared. We can't do much, but we can stand together. That's got to count for something." "It does," Mara said, and meant it. After they left, Elsie appeared on the porch. "Are those men going to fight Mr. Shaw?" "I don't know, baby." "Are we?" Mara looked at her daughter, 8 years old and asking about fighting like it was a normal thing, like violence was just another chore to be handled. The unfairness of it made Mara's chest ache. "Maybe," she said honestly. "Would that scare you?" Elsie thought about it. "I'm already scared. At least if we fight, we're doing something." Out of the mouths of children, Mara pulled Elsie close, kissed the top of her head. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just don't notice 'cause you're busy." A surprised laugh burst out of Mara. The first real laugh in days. It felt good. "You're right. I'm sorry." "It's okay. Papa was busy too. It's what grown-ups do." The mention of Thomas sent a pang through Mara's heart. He would have known what to do. He'd been good at that, seeing problems clearly, finding solutions that didn't involve bloodshed. But Thomas was gone, and Mara was just making it up as she went, trying not to get her daughter killed in the process. Late that afternoon, she returned to the boarding house. Mrs. Chen answered the door before Mara could knock. "He's back," the old woman said without preamble. "Room 4. Been there an hour. Looks like hell." Mara took the stairs 2 at a time, Elsie trailing behind. She knocked on the door marked with a crooked brass 4. "It's open." Colter sat on the narrow bed, his back against the wall. He did look like hell. Dark circles under his eyes, dust coating every inch of him, a fresh cut above his left eyebrow. His hat lay on the bed beside him, and his hair stood up at odd angles, but his eyes were sharp, alert. "Mrs. Vale, Elsie." He didn't stand, just watched them from the bed like standing required more energy than he could spare. "You look terrible," Mara said. "Feel worse." He gestured to the only chair in the room. "Sit. I got a lot to tell you." Mara sat. Elsie stayed close to her mother, staring at Colter with open curiosity. Colter leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Stillwater Junction's a ghost town, literally. Buildings are still standing, but nobody's living in them. I found 12 empty houses. All the records at the land office show sales to Gideon Shaw within the same 6-month period. Every single one. Where did the people go? That's the thing. They didn't. Colter's voice was flat, hard. I found graves outside town. Fresh enough that the ground's still settling, no markers, no names, just mounds of dirt in a field that used to be pasture. Mara's blood went cold. "You think Shaw a such shit day Shaw keys the shop?" "I know Shaw, or I know his men." Colter pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket, smoothed it on his knee. It was covered in names, dates, details written in cramped handwriting. I talked to a man in the next town over. Used to be a clerk in Stillwater Junction. He kept records, knew something was wrong but was too scared to say anything. When Shaw's operation moved on, the clerk ran. Been living under a different name ever since. What did he tell you? That families who refused Shaw's offers started disappearing. Not all at once, one or two at a time. Bodies would turn up in ravines, wells, burned out buildings. Accidents, the sheriff called them. Tragic accidents. But there were too many, too convenient, and the sheriff was on Shaw's payroll, so nobody investigated. Mara felt sick. How many? In Stillwater? The clerk counted at least 20, maybe more. In Garrison, where my family was, probably another 15. In Copper Ridge before that, he didn't know. But the pattern's the same. Shaw moves in, identifies the most valuable land, makes offers. Families who refuse get pressured. If they still refuse, Colter's jaw tightened. They don't get to refuse anymore. That's murder. That's business, according to Shaw. Colter looked at her directly. And Red Hollow's next. You understand what that means? This isn't about land. This is about power. About a man who's figured out he can take whatever he wants as long as he's got enough money and enough violence to back it up. Mara's hands were shaking. She clasped them together to make it stop. So what do? We expose him. Get evidence to someone who can actually stop him. Federal marshal, maybe. State authorities. Someone Shaw doesn't own. And how do we get evidence? We start by organizing the people here. Get them to come forward. Testify. Share what they know. Shaw's been operating for years. Someone's got to have something. Documents, contracts, proof of intimidation. Colter stood, started pacing. The room was too small for it, but he moved anyway. The Carter's barn fire. That wasn't random. Shaw's trying to scare people into submission. We use that, turn the fear into anger, get folks mad enough to fight back. I already have people, Mara said quietly. Danny Fletcher came by this morning, said there's a dozen men ready to help, maybe more. Colter stopped pacing. You trust them? I think so. They've all lost something to Shaw. They're tired of losing. Tired and desperate are different from brave. Then we make them brave. Mara stood, faced him. You said we need to organize, so let's organize. My property's far enough from town that Shaw won't notice people coming and going. We gather folks there. Share what you found. Make a plan. Your property's also isolated, easy to surround, easy to trap. You got a better idea? Colter was quiet for a moment. Then he shook his head. No, you're right. We need a base. Might as well be yours. He grabbed his hat, settled it on his head. When? Tonight, after dark. Spread the word quiet-like. Only people we trust. And if Shaw finds out, then we find out who we can really trust. Mara met his eyes. This is happening, with or without you, but I'd rather it be with. Something shifted in Colter's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. All right, tonight, I'll bring what I found. You get your people there. And Mrs. Vale? Yeah? Keep that Derringer close. Things are going to get worse before they get better. Barpachetti. Word spread faster than Mara expected. By the time the sun set, she'd gotten messages from 15 different people saying they'd come. Danny Fletcher arrived first, just after dark, riding a borrowed horse. Then came the Peterson brothers, 2 lean farmhands who'd lost their family's spread 3 years back. Then Sarah Carter with her husband John, both looking hollowed out but determined. More followed. Old Man Mackenzie, the widow Harris, young couples with children sleeping in their arms. Men Mara barely knew but recognized from town. By 9 o'clock, there were 23 people crowded into Mara's small house and spilling onto the porch. Lanterns cast flickering shadows. The air smelled of dust and sweat and fear. Colter arrived last, slipping through the darkness like a ghost. He carried a leather satchel that he set on Mara's kitchen table with a heavy thud. The room went quiet. Thank you all for coming, Mara said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Too formal. Too much like a leader, which she wasn't. But everyone was looking at her, waiting. I know it's dangerous. I know some of you are scared. I'm scared too. But we're here because we're tired of being scared alone. We're here because Gideon Shaw has taken enough from us. And we're here because we're ready to fight back. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Colter stepped forward. My name's Colter Ridge. Some of you know me, most don't. What you need to know is that I've been tracking Gideon Shaw for 2 years, across 4 towns, and everywhere he goes, the same thing happens. Good people lose everything, then they disappear. He opened the satchel, pulled out the papers. I've got evidence, names, dates, patterns, enough to prove Shaw's been running a criminal operation for years, but evidence doesn't mean anything if nobody sees it. If nobody acts on it, that's where you come in. Well, done, sis. John Carter spoke up, voice rough. What are you asking us to do? Testify, sign statements, share your stories, every threat Shaw made, every illegal contract, every piece of land taken under false pretenses. We build a case so solid that even his bought sheriff can't ignore it. Then we take it to the federal marshal in Denver. And if Shaw finds out before we can get to Denver, someone asked from the back, he probably will, which is why we move fast and why we watch each other's backs. Shaw's power comes from isolation, from making you feel alone. But you're not alone. Look around, count how many people are in this room. That's your army. We're not soldiers, Old Man Mackenzie said. We're farmers, shopkeepers. We don't know how to fight. You know how to survive, Colter shot back. You've been surviving Shaw for years. That takes strength, takes guts. All I'm asking is that you use that strength together instead of separately. Sarah Carter stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. Our barn burned 3 days ago. Everything we had went up in flames. Shaw sent men. They didn't say it was them, but we know. Everyone knows. And if we do nothing, it'll keep happening. One by one, we'll all burn. So I'm in. John and I are in. Whatever you need, you've got it. Her husband nodded agreement. Danny Fletcher raised his hand. Me too. I'm in. One by one, hands went up. Voices calling out agreement. Not everyone. A few people hung back, uncertain, but most of the room was with them. Mara felt something swell in her chest. Hope. Dangerous, fragile hope. Colter laid out the papers on the table. Here's what we know. In Stillwater Junction, Shaw used a man named Marcus Webb to handle the dirty work. Intimidation, arson, worse. Webb's still working for him. Operates out of Red Hollow now. Big guy, scar across his nose, usually travels with 2 others. I've seen him, Danny said. At the saloon. Drinks there most nights. Good. We need to know his patterns. Where he goes. Who he talks to. Same with Shaw's other men. We need eyes on them at all times. You want us to spy? Someone asked nervously. I want you to pay attention. Notice things. Webb shows up at someone's property. We need to know immediately. Shaw makes another offer. We document it. Everything gets written down, dated, witnessed. We build the case piece by piece. John Carter leaned over the papers, squinting at Colter's cramped handwriting. You got proof people were killed? I got graves. I got witness testimony from the clerk in Stillwater. I got disappearances that line up too perfectly to be coincidence. Colter's voice was hard. What I don't have is bodies with names. Shaw's too smart for that. But the pattern's clear, and patterns are enough to start an investigation. When do we go to Denver? Mara asked. 3 days? Maybe 4? We need enough statements that the marshal can't ignore us. Right now we've got suspicion. We need facts, dates, names. Who was threatened? Who was forced to sell? Who disappeared? The next hour was spent organizing. Colter divided people into groups. Watchers who'd keep track of Shaw's men. Documenters who'd write down every incident, every threat, every suspicious event. Runners who'd carry messages between properties. It was rough, improvised, but it was something. As the meeting started to break up, people filtering out into the night in 1s and 2s to avoid suspicion, Mara caught Colter's arm. You really think this'll work? I think it's our only shot. He looked tired, older than his years. Shaw's gotten away with this for too long. He thinks he's untouchable. That'll make him careless. We just gotta be ready when he slips. And if he doesn't slip, then we make him. After everyone left, Mara barricaded the door again. Elsie had fallen asleep on the couch during the meeting, and Mara carried her to bed. The girl barely stirred. Exhaustion was becoming their normal state. Mara sat at the kitchen table, looking at the papers Colter had left. Names of dead towns, families that didn't exist anymore. a trail of destruction leading straight to Red Hollow. She picked up a pencil, pulled a clean sheet of paper toward her, and started writing. Her own statement. Every interaction with Shaw. Every threat. Every moment of fear. If they were building a case, her story needed to be part of it. She wrote until her hand cramped, until the candle burned low, until the words blurred together. Then she heard the horses. Mara was on her feet instantly, shotgun in hand. Through the window she saw riders approaching, 4 of them, moving fast. They didn't bother with stealth. She recognized the lead rider even in darkness. Marcus Webb, the man Colter had described, big, mean-looking. The others fanned out, surrounding the house. Mara's heart hammered. She checked the shotgun, checked the derringer in her pocket, looked toward Elsie's room. The girl was still sleeping. Thank God. A voice called out, Webb. Mrs. Vale, we know you're in there. We know you had company tonight. Lots of company. Damn. Someone had talked. Or someone had been watching. Come out and let's talk civilized-like. Or we come in. Your choice. Mara's mind raced. 4 men. She had 2 shots in the shotgun, 2 in the derringer. Not enough, not nearly enough. But if they came through that door, Elsie, she made a decision, grabbed her coat, checked that the derringer was secure, and opened the door. Stepped onto the porch with the shotgun raised. That's far enough, she said. Her voice didn't shake. Small miracle. Webb sat his horse easy, like he had all the time in the world. Up close, he was even bigger than she'd thought. The scar across his nose was thick, ropey. An old wound, badly healed. He smiled when he saw her. There she is, the famous Mara Vale. Heard you've been busy tonight. Having yourself a little meeting. My property. I can have whoever I want. True. True. Webb's smile widened. But when that whoever includes troublemakers and outside agitators, well, that becomes Mr. Shaw's business. And Mr. Shaw, he don't appreciate folks plotting against him. We weren't plotting anything. No? Then what do you call 20-some people sneaking to your house after dark? Webb leaned forward in his saddle. We ain't stupid, lady. We know what you're trying to do. And I'm here to tell you it ain't gonna work. You threatening me? I'm informing you. There's a difference. Webb gestured to the men with him. See, Mr. Shaw's been patient. Real patient. But patience runs out. And when it does, well, accidents happen. Like what happened to the Carters. Like what could happen here. Tonight even. Terrible thing. House fire. Especially with a child inside. Rage flooded through Mara, hot and blinding. She raised the shotgun higher. You threaten my daughter again. I'll kill you where you sit. Webb laughed. Actually laughed. You got spirit. I like that. But spirit don't stop bullets. Don't stop fire. Don't stop 4 men who know what they're doing. Don't stop 1 woman with a shotgun aimed at your chest either. The laughter died. Webb's eyes went cold. You pull that trigger, my boys here'll cut you down before you can reload. Then they'll burn this place to ash. Your girl included. That what you want? Mara's finger trembled on the trigger. She wanted to shoot. Wanted it more than she'd wanted anything in years. But he was right. She'd get 1 shot. Maybe 2 if she was lucky. Then they'd kill her, and Elsie would be alone. She lowered the shotgun slightly. Not surrender, just calculation. What does Shaw want? Same as before. You sign over your property, take the money, leave Red Hollow, everybody walks away happy. And if I refuse? Then we stop being polite. A sound behind Webb made everyone turn. Another rider emerged from the darkness, moving fast. Colter Ridge. He had a rifle across his saddle, and he didn't look tired anymore. He looked dangerous. Evening, Webb, Colter said calmly. He reined up 20 feet away, keeping distance but staying within rifle range. Funny running into you here. Webb's face went tight. Ridge, should have known you'd show up. Should have known you'd try something stupid. Colter's voice was conversational, but the rifle never wavered. 4 men against 1 woman, real brave. We're just having a conversation. Looked more like a threat to me. You want to make something of it? Colter smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I'm here, aren't I? The tension ratcheted up. Mara could feel it, thick and dangerous. Webb's men shifted in their saddles. Hands drifted toward weapons. 1 wrong move, and this would turn into a bloodbath. Then another sound, more horses. Mara's heart sank. if Shaw had sent reinforcements. But the riders that appeared weren't Shaw's men. They were the people from the meeting. Danny Fletcher in front, the Peterson brothers flanking him. John Carter, Old Man Mackenzie, a dozen others, all armed. They spread out in a loose line surrounding Webb and his men. Webb's confidence faltered. He looked around, taking in the numbers, and his hand dropped away from his gun. "Well," he said slowly, "this is interesting." "Real interesting," Danny agreed. "See, we had a feeling you might show up, so we decided to stick around, make sure Mrs. Vale was safe." "This ain't your fight, boy." "It's everyone's fight. You made it that way." Danny's voice was steady. "Now here's what's going to happen. You and your boys are going to turn around and ride back to town. And you're going to tell Shaw that Red Hollow's done being scared." Webb's jaw worked. He was outgunned, and he knew it. But backing down wasn't easy for a man like him. "Shaw ain't going to like this," he said finally. "Shaw can go to hell," John Carter said flatly. "Tell him that too." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Webb yanked his horse's head around, spurring hard. His men followed. They rode off into the darkness, and Mara could hear cursing fading with the hoofbeats. The silence after they left was deafening. Then Danny started laughing. Not hysterical, just relieved. "Did you see his face? When we showed up, I thought he was going to fall off his horse." Others joined in, nervous laughter, the kind that follows near-death experiences. Mara lowered the shotgun, realized her arms were shaking. Colter dismounted, approached the porch. "You okay?" "Yeah." Mara's voice was hoarse. "Yeah, I'm okay. That was close. Too close." "It's going to get closer." Colter looked at the assembled group. "Shaw knows now. About the meeting. About us organizing. He's going to hit back hard." "Let him," Danny said, still riding the adrenaline high. "We're ready." "Are you?" Colter's voice cut through the bravado. "Ready to fight? Really fight? Because that's what's coming. Not threats, not intimidation. Violence, blood, maybe death. You all understand that?" The laughter died. People shifted uncomfortably. The reality of what they'd started settling in. Sarah Carter spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. "We understand, and we're still here. We've lost too much to back down now." Murmurs of agreement. Colter nodded slowly. "All right then. We move up the timeline. Tomorrow, we start collecting statements. Day after, we ride for Denver. We get the marshal here before Shaw can regroup. That's the play." "What if Shaw moves first?" someone asked. "Then we defend ourselves." Colter's eyes swept the group. "Every property needs to be watched. Nobody works alone. Nobody travels alone. We stay together. Understand?" More nods. "Good. Now go home. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we finish this." People started dispersing again, but this time there was energy in their movements. Purpose. They'd stood up to Shaw's men and survived. That counted for something. After everyone left, Mara sat on the porch steps. Colter joined her, his rifle propped against the railing. "You did good tonight," he said. "I almost shot him." "Probably should have." "Then Elsie would have been orphaned." "Maybe. Or maybe Webb's boys would have scattered. Hard to say." Colter pulled out a battered tin of tobacco, rolled a cigarette with practiced ease. "Either way, you stood your ground. That matters." Mara watched the ember flare as he lit up. "How'd you know to come back?" "I didn't. Just had a feeling Shaw would make a move after the meeting. Decided to keep watch." "You've been watching my house all night?" "Someone had to." They sat in silence for a while. The night was cooling down, finally. Mara could hear crickets in the grass, the distant sound of Daisy moving in the barn. "Your family," she said quietly. "In Garrison." "What were they like?" Colter was quiet for so long Mara thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "My father was stubborn. Believed if you worked hard enough, you could overcome anything. Ma was practical. Kept us all fed through 2 droughts and a hard winter that killed half the valley's cattle. My brother, he was the baby. Looked up to Pa something fierce. When we lost everything, it destroyed him. Couldn't accept that working hard wasn't enough." "I'm sorry. It's done. Can't change it. Can only make sure it doesn't keep happening." He took a long drag, exhaled smoke into the night air. "That's why I'm here. Why I'll keep doing this in the next town and the one after that. Until men like Shaw learn there's consequences. You really think we can stop him? I think we can try. That's all anyone can do. Inside the house, Elsie called out in her sleep. A nightmare, probably. Mara started to rise, but the girl settled again without waking. She's tough, Colter observed. She's 8 years old. She shouldn't have to be tough. No, but she is anyway. Like her mother. Mara looked at him. In the moonlight, his face was all angles and shadows. Hard-lived, scarred, but his eyes were kind when they met hers. Thank you, she said, for coming back, for helping. You didn't have to. Yeah, Colter said softly. I did. He stood, ground out the cigarette under his heel. Get some sleep, Mrs. Vale. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. You staying close? I'll be around. He disappeared into the darkness, and Mara was alone again. But somehow, the night felt less heavy, less hopeless. She went inside, checked on Elsie, re-barricaded the door, lay down in bed with the shotgun within reach and the Derringer under her pillow. And for the first time in days, she slept. Morning came too fast and not fast enough. Mara woke to sunlight streaming through the gap in the curtains and Elsie already dressed, sitting at the kitchen table with a piece of bread. The girl looked up when Mara emerged, eyes serious. People are coming, Elsie said. I saw them from the window. Mara crossed to look. Sure enough, Danny Fletcher was riding up the path, and behind him came others. The Peterson brothers, Sarah and John Carter in their wagon. More following. By the time Mara had pulled on her boots and splashed water on her face, there were a dozen people in her yard. She stepped onto the porch. What's going on? Danny dismounted, his young face set with determination. We figured if we're collecting statements, might as well start now. Get it done while we still got courage. John Carter climbed down from his wagon, helped Sarah after him. We brought paper, pencils. Figured we'd write everything down proper. Dates, names, everything Shaw's done. Colter said we had until tomorrow. Webb knows we're organizing, Danny interrupted. Shaw knows. Clock's ticking faster now. We get this done today, ride for Denver at first light tomorrow. Don't give Shaw time to make another move. It made sense. Terrifying sense. Mara nodded slowly. All right. Come inside. We'll use the kitchen table. The next hours blurred together. People came in shifts, telling their stories while someone else wrote. Mara heard things she'd suspected but never confirmed. The Harrison family hadn't just left. Their oldest son had disappeared 2 days before they signed over their land. Never found. Sheriff Drummond ruled it a probable drowning, never mind that the creek was bone dry that summer. The Boone family lost their daughter to a suspicious riding accident the week Shaw made his first offer. Horse spooked, they said, threw her into a rock face, killed instantly. After that, the Boones sold for a fraction of what the land was worth, and were gone within days. Story after story. Threats disguised as friendly advice. Loans that appeared in ledgers even though no money had changed hands. Fires, accidents, disappearances. A pattern so clear it made Mara sick. Sarah Carter's statement was the hardest to hear. She spoke in a monotone, like emotion would break her if she let it in. The night before our barn burned, a man came. Not Webb. Someone else. Said he was a friend of Mr. Shaw's. Said Shaw was concerned about our safety. Said the drought made fires so common, and wouldn't it be terrible if something happened? John told him to leave. Next night, the barn was burning. John's hands clenched on the table as his wife spoke. I should have seen it coming, should have done something. You did what you could, Mara said quietly. We all did. By midday, they had 17 written statements, 17 accounts of intimidation, coercion, violence. Colter arrived around noon with more papers from his saddlebag, the records from Stillwater Junction, the testimony from the clerk, a map showing Shaw's progression across the territory. He spread everything on the table, organizing it like a prosecutor building a case. This is good, real good. We got enough here that the marshal can't ignore it. When do we leave? Danny asked. Dawn, I'll take the statements. You all stay here, watch each other's backs. Shaw's going to know something's up when I ride out. He'll try to stop me. Then take someone with you, John Carter said. 2 riders are harder to stop than 1. I work alone. Not anymore, Danny said firmly. We're in this together, remember? I'll ride with you. I know the territory. Know the shortcuts. Colter looked like he wanted to argue, but Mara caught his eye and shook her head slightly. Let them help. They needed to feel useful. All right, Colter said finally, but you follow my lead. Things go bad, you run. You don't try to be a hero. Understood? Understood. They spent the afternoon preparing, checking weapons, planning routes. Danny knew a back trail that would cut 6 hours off the ride to Denver, but it was rough going. Colter said rough was fine. Rough meant Shaw's men were less likely to follow. As the sun started its descent, Mara pulled Colter aside. They stood near the barn, out of earshot from the others. You really think the marshal will help? She asked. I think he'll have to. We got evidence, we got witnesses, we got a pattern of criminal activity across multiple jurisdictions. Even if Shaw's bought some local officials, the federal government doesn't take kindly to land fraud and murder. And if he doesn't help? Colter was quiet. Then we go higher. Territorial governor, Congress if we have to. Someone will listen eventually. Eventually might be too late. I know. He met her eyes. That's why I need you to promise me something. If this goes wrong, if Shaw comes after you while I'm gone, you take Elsie and run. Don't try to fight. Don't try to hold the property. Just run. Mara's jaw tightened. This land is dirt and wood. You're flesh and blood. So's your daughter. Priorities, Mrs. Vale. Easy for you to say. You already lost everything. The words came out harsher than Mara intended. Colter flinched like she'd slapped him. I'm sorry, she said immediately. That wasn't fair. No, it was honest. Colter looked away toward the horizon where the sun was painting the sky orange. You're right. I got nothing left to lose, but you do, and I'm asking you to protect that. Please. The word hung between them. Colter Ridge didn't seem like a man who said please very often. I'll think about it, Mara said finally. That'll have to be good enough. That evening, people gathered one more time at Mara's property. Not a meeting this time, more like a vigil. Families sat together in the yard, sharing food, talking quietly. Children played near the barn, their laughter strange and beautiful against the weight of everything else. Elsie sat with 2 other girls her age, teaching them some hand-clapping game. The normalcy of it made Mara's chest ache. Sarah Carter appeared at Mara's elbow, holding 2 tin cups of coffee. She offered one to Mara. Thought you could use this. Thank you. Mara sipped. It was terrible coffee, weak and bitter, but hot. That was enough. My grandmother used to say that the night before a battle, you should remember what you're fighting for, Sarah said. Not the land or the money or the principle, the actual people, the faces, the lives. She gestured to the children. That's what I'm remembering, that my daughters deserve to grow up somewhere they don't have to be afraid. Your grandmother was a smart woman. She was a hard woman, raised 6 children during the war, lost 2 husbands, never complained once. Used to tell me that strength isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing what needs doing anyway. Mara watched Elsie laugh at something one of the other girls said. I'm terrified. Good. Means you're paying attention. Sarah squeezed Mara's shoulder. But you're not running. That counts for something. After dark, people started drifting home in pairs and small groups. Colter and Danny would leave before dawn, which meant everyone needed rest. John Carter promised to check on Mara's property while she was alone. Old Man Mackenzie said he'd keep watch from his place, which overlooked the main road into the valley. They were building a network. Fragile, improvised, but real. When everyone had gone, Mara sat on the porch with Elsie. The girl leaned against her mother, tired but not ready for bed yet. Mama, are Mr. Ridge and Danny going to be okay? I hope so, baby. What if they're not? Then we keep fighting anyway. Elsie absorbed this. I wish Papa was here. He'd know what to do. Yeah, me too. Mara kissed the top of Elsie's head. But he's not. So we got to figure it out ourselves. Are we doing it right? I don't know. I hope so. Me too. They sat until the stars came out. Then Mara carried Elsie inside and tucked her into bed. The girl was asleep before Mara finished pulling up the blanket. Mara didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table with the shotgun across her lap, watching the darkness through the window, waiting for dawn. It came eventually. It always did. Montauk. Colter and Danny rode out just as the sun broke the horizon. Mara watched them go, the saddlebags heavy with documents and statements. Evidence that could bring down an empire or get two good men killed, maybe both. The day after they left was the longest of Mara's life. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed suspicious. She kept Elsie close, worked on small chores around the property, tried to act normal. But normal felt like a foreign concept. Around noon, a rider appeared. Mara's hand went to the derringer before she recognized him, one of the Peterson brothers, the younger one. He looked spooked. "Mrs. Vale, you need to come to town, now." Mara's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "Shaw's called a town meeting, says he's got important business to discuss, says everyone needs to be there." "That's not suspicious at all." "Yeah, but if we don't show, he'll know something's wrong. We gotta play it normal, act like we're still scared." Mara looked at Elsie, who'd appeared in the doorway. "I can't bring her. Mrs. Chen said she'd watch her. At the boarding house. She's good people." It was a risk. Everything was a risk now, but the boy was right. If Mara didn't show, it would raise questions, and the last thing they needed was Shaw getting suspicious before Colter reached Denver. "All right, let me get ready." 20 minutes later, Mara was riding into Red Hollow with the Peterson boy. They'd left Elsie with Mrs. Chen, who'd promised to keep the girl safe and out of sight. The old woman had a Winchester rifle propped in the corner of her kitchen, and the hard eyes of someone who knew how to use it. The town square was crowded when they arrived. Seemed like everyone in Red Hollow had turned out. Shaw stood on the steps of the bank, dressed in his usual black suit, looking calm and confident. Sheriff Drummond stood beside him, hand resting casually on his gun belt. Webb and his men lurked at the edges of the crowd. Mara dismounted, tied her horse, and merged into the back of the crowd. She spotted Sarah Carter near the front, John beside her. Other faces from the meeting. They all wore the same carefully neutral expressions. Shaw raised his hands, and the crowd quieted. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice carrying easily. "I know it's an inconvenience, pulling you from your work in the middle of the day, but recent events have made it necessary to address some concerns directly." "Here it comes," Mara thought. "It's come to my attention," Shaw continued, "that certain individuals have been spreading malicious rumors designed to undermine the prosperity and stability of this community. Rumors about my business practices, my intentions, my character." His smile was pleasant, deadly. "Now, I'm a reasonable man. I understand that in difficult times, people look for someone to blame. And as the most successful businessman in the valley, I'm an easy target." A few nervous laughs from the crowd. But rumors become dangerous when they inspire action, when they lead good people to make bad decisions, to align themselves with outsiders who don't understand our community, who don't care about Red Hollow's future. Shaw's eyes scanned the crowd, and Mara felt his gaze pass over her. "So I want to make something crystal clear. I am not your enemy. I have invested significant resources in this valley. I employ many of you. I provide loans that keep businesses running. I am the reason Red Hollow still exists." John Carter's hands clenched at his sides. Mara could see the fury in his posture, but he stayed silent. "However," Shaw said, his voice hardening, "I will not tolerate sedition. I will not tolerate conspiracy. And I will not tolerate anyone who seeks to destroy what I've built here." He paused for effect. "Yesterday, I learned that certain individuals held a secret meeting. A meeting designed to organize resistance against legitimate business operations. A meeting that included wild accusations and baseless conspiracy theories." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People glanced at each other. Those who'd been at Mara's house kept their faces blank. "Now I could involve the law," Shaw continued. "Conspiracy to commit fraud is a serious crime. Slander is actionable. But I prefer to handle things personally." He smiled again. "So here's what's going to happen. Anyone involved in this little rebellion has 24 hours to come to my office and apologize. Sign a statement retracting any false claims. After that, we'll put this unpleasantness behind us. And if we don't apologize?" Danny's voice rang out from the crowd. The Peterson boy, brave and stupid. Shaw's smile didn't waver. "Then you'll learn that Red Hollow is no place for troublemakers. The valley has a way of spitting out those who don't belong. Accidents happen. Businesses fail. People leave. It's tragic, but natural." The threat was clear, crystal clear, and everyone heard it. "Now," Shaw said, his tone lightening, I don't want it to come to that. I genuinely don't. I'd much rather we all work together. So please, think carefully about your choices. Think about your families, your futures. Don't throw away everything you've built for some stranger's vendetta. He descended the steps. The crowd began to disperse, people moving quickly, heads down. Nobody wanted to be caught looking interested. Mara felt a hand on her arm. Sarah Carter, her face pale. He knows. Not everything. If he knew about Colter riding to Denver, he would have sent men after him already. You sure about that? Mara wasn't, but she nodded anyway. We stick to the plan, act normal, wait for Colter to get back. And if he doesn't come back? The question Mara had been avoiding. Then we figure out plan B. We don't have a plan B. Then we better hope Colter's lucky. That night, alone in her house with Elsie sleeping fitfully in the next room, Mara heard the first gunshot. It came from the direction of the Carter ranch. A single crack, sharp and clear in the quiet night. Then shouting. Then more shots. Mara grabbed the shotgun and ran outside. Other people were emerging from their homes, looking toward the distant orange glow that was starting to light the horizon. Fire. Again. She saddled her horse with shaking hands, rode toward the Carters. Other riders joined her. By the time they reached the property, the house was fully engulfed. John Carter stood in the yard, his face lit by flames, holding a rifle. His clothes were scorched. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead. "Where's Sarah?" Mara shouted over the roar of the fire. "Inside with the girls." John's voice was hollow, empty. "They barricaded the doors, set it on fire. I tried to get them out, but..." He didn't finish. Didn't need to. The Peterson brothers arrived, took one look at the inferno, and started organizing a bucket line. But it was too late. Everyone knew it was too late. The fire was too big, too hot, too fast. Mara dismounted, went to John. He was shaking, in shock. "They came right after dark," he said quietly. "Webb and 5 others. Said Shaw sent them. Said we had 12 hours left to apologize, but Shaw thought we needed a reminder of what happens to people who defy him." John's voice cracked. "Sarah told them to go to hell. So they locked us in the house and lit it up. I broke through a window in the back, got out. But Sarah and the girls, they were upstairs. I couldn't reach them. I couldn't..." He collapsed to his knees. Mara knelt beside him, put a hand on his shoulder. There were no words. Nothing that would make this better. Around them, people worked frantically to keep the fire from spreading. The bucket line moved water that evaporated on contact. Men beat at sparks with blankets. Women shepherded children away from the heat. The house burned until there was nothing left but charred timbers and ash. As dawn broke, Mara stood in the ruins of what had been the Carter family home and felt something inside her break. Not break. Transform. Fear became fury. Grief became rage. She looked at the people gathered around the smoking remains, saw the same transformation happening in their faces, the last threads of doubt, of hesitation, burning away like the house. "This ends now," she said. Her voice was quiet, but everyone heard. "Shaw did this. Webb did this. And they're going to answer for it." "How?" someone asked. "Colter's gone. We got no law on our side. No..." "We're the law," Mara interrupted. "We're the witnesses. We're the jury. And we're done waiting for someone else to save us." The Peterson boy spoke up. "What are you saying?" Mara looked at John Carter kneeling in the ash, broken and grieving. Looked at the faces around her, scared and angry and desperate. Looked at the sky starting to lighten, at the new day coming whether they were ready or not. "I'm saying we go to Shaw. Today. Now. And we make him confess. We make him admit what he's done. And then we decide what happens to him." "That's vigilante justice," Old Man Mackenzie said. That's all we got left," Mara cut in. "The law failed us. The system failed us. Sarah Carter and her daughters are dead because we followed the rules. We tried doing it right, and they burned for it." Silence. Heavy and charged. Then John Carter stood. His face was streaked with soot and tears, but his eyes were clear, hard. "I'm in," he said. "Whatever you're planning, I'm in." One by one, others nodded. The Peterson brothers, Danny Fletcher's father, who'd arrived sometime during the night, the widow Harris, people Mara barely knew but who'd lost just as much. "Shaw's got men," someone pointed out. Webb and at least a dozen others. We go after him directly. It'll be a bloodbath. Then we're smart about it, Mara said. We don't storm his house. We get him alone, isolated. Make him vulnerable the way he's made us vulnerable. How? Mara's mind was racing. Webb's at the saloon every night. That's what Danny said, right? He drinks there, gets careless. If we can take Webb, we can trade him. Webb for Shaw's confession. You think Shaw cares about Webb enough to confess? I think Webb knows where the bodies are buried. Literally. Shaw won't let him get captured and questioned. He'll either come for him or kill him. Either way, we get our chance. It was a terrible plan. Desperate and dangerous and likely to get people killed. But nobody had a better one. They made preparations quickly, split into groups. Half would stay at the Carter property, protect it from further assault, and give the appearance of people in mourning. The other half would move into town, quiet and careful. They'd take Webb tonight when he was drunk and vulnerable. Hold him somewhere Shaw couldn't reach. Force a confrontation. Mara rode back to her property to check on Elsie. Found Mrs. Chen sitting on the porch with the Winchester across her lap and the girl safe inside. Heard about the Carters, Mrs. Chen said. Terrible thing. Yeah. You planning something stupid? Probably, Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. Good. Stupid's all that's left when smart fails. You need me to keep the girl a while longer? Please. I don't know how long. Could be hours. Could be days. Take what time you need. She's safe here. I promise you that. Mara hugged the old woman. Thank you. Inside, Elsie was playing with a wooden doll Mrs. Chen had given her. She looked up when Mara entered. Mama, what's wrong? Everything, Mara thought, but she forced a smile. Nothing, baby. I just need you to stay with Mrs. Chen a little longer. Can you do that for me? Elsie's eyes were too knowing. Are you going to fight Mr. Shaw? I'm going to try to make things right. Will you come back? The question cut deep. Mara knelt, took her daughter's hands. I'm going to do everything I can to come back, but if something happens, if I don't, Mrs. Chen will take care of you, and you remember what I taught you, about being strong, about not giving up. Mama, you're the best thing I ever did, Elsie, the best thing your papa and I ever did, and I need you to know that, no matter what happens, understand? Elsie's chin trembled. Then she nodded, threw her arms around Mara's neck, and held tight. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. So much. Mara held her daughter for a long moment, memorizing the feel of her, the smell of her hair, the sound of her breathing. Then she made herself let go, made herself stand, made herself walk out the door before her courage failed. Mrs. Chen was still on the porch. You come back to that girl, you hear me? I'll try. Don't try. Do. Mara nodded, mounted her horse, rode toward town with the sun climbing higher, and her heart somewhere between breaking and hardening into something that could survive what came next. In Red Hollow, Shaw's men were visible everywhere, patrolling the streets, standing outside the bank, the saloon, watching, waiting for retaliation that they thought wouldn't come because it never had before. But tonight was different. Tonight, Red Hollow stopped being afraid. And tomorrow, one way or another, the blood would settle the score. The saloon was loud by the time darkness settled over Red Hollow. Mara could hear it from across the street where she crouched behind a water trough with the Peterson brothers flanking her. Piano music jangled out of tune, punctuated by rough laughter and the clink of glasses. Through the grimy window she could see Webb at his usual table, already 3 drinks deep by the look of him. He's got 2 men with him, the older Peterson whispered. Same as always. We take them quiet, Mara said. Get Webb out the back. Nobody sees anything until it's done. And if he fights? Mara's hand went to the derringer in her pocket. Then we make him stop fighting. They waited another hour. Men filtered in and out of the saloon, but Webb stayed put. His companions got drunker, louder. One eventually stumbled outside to relieve himself in the alley. He didn't come back. Danny Fletcher had been waiting there with a length of rope and a quiet determination that surprised even Mara. Around midnight, Webb's second companion passed out face down on the table. Webb himself was swaying in his chair, working on what looked like his 8th or 9th whiskey. The bartender was cleaning glasses with mechanical efficiency, not looking at anyone. Either he was oblivious or he'd learned not to see things. In towns like Red Hollow, blindness was survival. Mara gave the signal. The Peterson brothers moved first, slipping through the back door. Mara counted to 30, then followed. The saloon's rear entrance opened into a narrow hallway that reeked of stale beer and vomit. She could hear Webb's voice from the main room, slurring through some story about breaking a man's jaw in Copper Ridge. The Petersons appeared in the doorway, beckoning. Mara moved forward, keeping to the shadows. Webb was alone now at his table, the unconscious companion drooling into the wood. Perfect. The older Peterson brother stepped into the main room first, casual, like he'd just come in for a drink. He walked past Webb's table, stumbled deliberately, and knocked the whiskey bottle to the floor. It shattered loud. Webb lurched to his feet, cursing. "Watch where you're going, you." The younger Peterson brother hit him from behind with a chair. Not hard enough to knock him out. They needed him conscious, but hard enough to stagger him. Webb went to his knees, and Mara was there with the derringer pressed against the back of his skull. "Don't move. Don't yell. Don't do anything but stand up slow and walk." Webb froze. Even drunk, he recognized the click of a cocked pistol. "You're making a mistake. Made plenty of those already. One more won't hurt. Now move." They half-dragged, half-walked him through the back hallway and into the alley. Danny was there with the first guard tied and gagged in the shadows. The man's eyes were wide with fear, but he wasn't struggling. Smart. They took Webb to the old grain storage building at the edge of town. Nobody used it anymore. The roof leaked and rats had taken over the lower floors. But the cellar was dry and solid, built to last. John Carter was waiting there with a lantern and a length of chain. John's face was terrible to look at, empty, like all the warmth had burned out of him along with his family. "Chain him to the post," Mara said. Webb was struggling now, fighting against the hands holding him. "You people are insane. You know what Shaw's going to do when he finds out?" "That's what we're counting on," Mara said. They chained Webb to the support beam in the center of the cellar. He couldn't reach far enough to get free, but he had room to sit, to move. They weren't monsters, not yet. "What do you want?" Webb demanded. Blood trickled from where the chair had split his scalp. "Money. I got money. Shaw's got more. Name your price." "We want the truth," Mara said. "About the families that disappeared. About the fires. About who gave the orders." Webb laughed. Actually laughed. "You think I'm going to confess? You're dumber than I thought." John Carter stepped forward. In his hand was a knife. Just a working blade, nothing fancy, but sharp enough. He didn't say anything, just held it where Webb could see it. Webb's laughter died. "You ain't got the stomach for torture. My wife and daughters burned to death last night," John said quietly. His voice was completely flat. "You were there. You locked the doors, so when you talk about what I got the stomach for, you keep that in mind." Something shifted in Webb's eyes. Not fear, exactly, but recognition. The understanding that John Carter had crossed a line that most men never cross, and there was no going back from it. "What do you want to know?" Webb asked. "Everything." It took 3 hours. At first, Webb tried lying, tried deflecting, but every time he did, John would move closer with the knife, and Webb would reconsider. Eventually, the truth spilled out like water from a broken dam. The Harrisons hadn't left Red Hollow. They'd been killed. Father and oldest son shot, mother and younger children drowned in the creek, and buried in unmarked graves on what was now Shaw's land. The Boone's daughter hadn't died in a riding accident. She'd been murdered, made to look like an accident after her father refused Shaw's offer. The Vandermeers were buried somewhere near Copper Ridge. The pattern repeated across every town Shaw had operated in. Dozens of families. Dozens of bodies. "Shaw gives the orders," Webb said. His voice was hoarse from talking. "I just follow them. It's business, nothing personal." "You murdered children," Mara said. Her hands were shaking with rage. "You call that business?" "I call it survival. Shaw pays well. I do the jobs nobody else will do. That's how the world works." "Not anymore," Danny Fletcher said from the doorway. "Not in Red Hollow." They left Webb chained in the cellar with 2 men standing guard. Mara emerged into the pre-dawn darkness and leaned against the grain building's wall, breathing hard. Her stomach churned with everything she'd heard. The casual way Webb had described murder. The bodies. The families erased like they'd never existed. The Peterson brothers were pale. Danny looked like he might be sick. Even John Carter, who'd held himself together through Webb's confession, was shaking. "We got what we needed," Mara said. "Now we use it." "How?" the younger Peterson asked. "Webb confessed to us. Not to any law, his word against ours." "Then we make Shaw confirm it. We send him a message, tell him we have Webb, tell him we know everything, and we tell him to meet us at noon in the town square, public, where everyone can hear. He'll never come alone." "He won't come alone, but he'll come. Men like Shaw can't resist showing power, and if he doesn't come..." Mara's jaw set. "Then we take Webb to Denver ourselves. Let him confess to the marshal. Either way, Shaw is done." They sent the message at dawn. Old man Mackenzie delivered it personally to Shaw's house, a single piece of paper with simple words. "We have Webb. We know everything. Town square, noon. Come alone or everyone learns what you are." Shaw's response came within the hour. A note delivered by a boy who looked terrified. "I'll be there. But understand, this is war now, and you will lose." Mara read it, crumpled it, threw it in the dirt. "We'll see about that." The morning crawled past. Mara checked on Elsie at the boarding house, found her safe with Mrs. Chen. The old woman had barricaded the doors and windows, her Winchester loaded and ready. "You be careful," Mrs. Chen said. "Men like Shaw don't go down easy." "I know." "You got a plan for if things go bad?" "Run, hide, survive, same as always." Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. "Your daughter's going to need you when this is over. Don't you forget that." "I won't." By 11:30, people were gathering in the town square. Word had spread fast, faster than Mara expected. Not just the families who'd attended the meetings, but everyone. Shopkeepers closed their stores, ranch hands rode in from outlying properties. Even people who'd kept their heads down for years were there, drawn by the promise of something finally breaking. Sheriff Drummond stood on the bank steps, looking nervous. His hand kept drifting to his gun, then away, then back. He knew which way the wind was blowing, and he didn't like it. At 5 minutes to noon, Gideon Shaw arrived. He came in a black carriage pulled by matching horses, flanked by 6 armed men on horseback. The carriage door opened and Shaw stepped out, immaculate as always in his dark suit. He looked around the crowded square with something like amusement. "Well," he said, his voice carrying easily, "quite the turnout. I'm flattered." Mara stepped forward from the crowd. She'd left the shotgun behind but kept the Derringer. Around her she could feel Danny Fletcher, the Peterson brothers, John Carter, dozens of others, her people, her army. "Where's Webb?" Shaw asked pleasantly. "Safe, for now." "I assume you have demands?" "I have questions. You're going to answer them, here, in front of everyone." Shaw's smile thinned. "Am I?" "You are. Because if you don't, Webb talks. And what Webb knows will put you in front of a federal judge. Murder, land fraud, conspiracy. The list goes on. Webb is a drunk and a liar. Nobody will believe..." "We believe him," John Carter said, stepping up beside Mara. His voice was loud, clear. "We believe him because we've seen what you do. We've lost our families to it, our homes, our lives, and we're done being quiet." A murmur ran through the crowd, people nodding, agreeing. Shaw's expression flickered, the confidence cracking just slightly. He glanced at his men, at the sheriff, calculating odds. "This is absurd," he said. "I've invested in this valley, created opportunities, provided employment, and this is how you repay me? With wild accusations and mob justice?" "You murdered Sarah Carter and her daughters," Mara said. Her voice shook with fury. "You had Webb burn them alive in their own home. That's not business. That's evil. Prove it." "Webb already confessed. Named you. Named the orders you gave. Named the bodies." Shaw's jaw tightened. "Under duress, I'm sure. Tortured confessions aren't admissible. We didn't torture him. We just asked. And he sang like a canary." Mara took another step forward. "But you're right. His word alone might not be enough. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to confess. Right here, right now, in front of all these witnesses. You're going to admit what you've done. And then we're going to let the people of Red Hollow decide what happens to you." Shaw laughed. It sounded genuine. "You're joking. Why would I ever..." "Because if you don't, we kill Webb, slowly. And then we burn your house the way you burned the Carters, and then we come for you. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, and you'll never know when. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, waiting for one of us to put a bullet in you." The smile vanished from Shaw's face. "You're threatening me." "I'm promising you." The silence was thick. Shaw looked at Mara, really looked at her, and Mara saw the moment he understood. This wasn't the broken widow from the auction yard. This was something harder, angrier, dangerous. "You've changed," Shaw said quietly. "You made me change." Shaw was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed again, but it was different now. Bitter. "You know what the funny thing is? I almost admire you. Almost. You've got more spine than most men I've broken. But spine doesn't stop bullets. And I've got more bullets than you've got spine." He gestured. His men raised their rifles. The crowd erupted, people shouting, scrambling, women grabbing children, men reaching for weapons they'd hidden under coats. Then a voice cut through the chaos. New. Authoritative. "Nobody moves!" Every head turned. Colter Ridge sat on his gray horse at the edge of the square. Beside him was Danny Fletcher, and behind them were a dozen riders wearing federal marshal badges. At the center of the group was a stern-faced man in his 50s with silver hair and hard eyes. "I'm Federal Marshal Thomas Whitmore," the man announced, "and everyone here is going to lower their weapons right now, or I'll arrest the lot of you." Shaw's men hesitated, looked to Shaw. Shaw's face had gone white. "Lower them," Shaw said quietly. His voice was steady, but Mara could see the fear in his eyes now, real fear. The marshal dismounted, walked straight to Shaw. "Gideon Shaw, I'm placing you under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, land fraud, and about a dozen other charges I'll enumerate once we get you to Denver." "On what evidence?" Shaw demanded. "On the evidence provided by Mr. Ridge here. 17 sworn statements, documented deaths across 4 towns, a confession from your employee, Marcus Webb, recorded this morning, and testimony from a federal clerk who's been tracking your activities for 3 years. The marshal pulled out a pair of iron cuffs. "Turn around." Shaw didn't move. "I want a lawyer." "You'll get one in Denver. Now turn around or my deputies will make you." For a moment, Mara thought Shaw would run, or fight, or do something desperate, but he was a smart man, a calculating man, and he knew when he'd lost. He turned around. The marshal cuffed him. The sound of the iron clicking shut was the sweetest thing Mara had ever heard. Shaw's men were disarmed, arrested, loaded into a wagon. Webb was brought up from the cellar, still chained, and added to the group. The sheriff tried to fade into the crowd, but the marshal's deputies grabbed him too. "You're done, Drummond. Corruption, bribery, accessory to murder. You're going down with the rest of them." The whole arrest took maybe 20 minutes. By the time it was finished, Gideon Shaw's empire had collapsed like a house of cards. Colter dismounted, walked over to Mara. He looked exhausted, but satisfied. "You cut it close," Mara said. "Had to wait for the marshal to gather his men. Couldn't come back without proper authority." He gestured to the crowd. "Looks like you handled things pretty well without me." "We almost got everyone killed." "Almost doesn't count," Colter smiled. It was the first real smile Mara had seen from him. "You did good, Mrs. Vale. Real good." The marshal approached. "I'm going to need statements from everyone, proper official statements. It'll take time." "We've got time," Mara said. "We've got nothing but time now." The next 3 weeks were a blur of testimony and paperwork. The marshal set up a temporary office in Red Hollow, taking statements from everyone who'd been affected by Shaw's operation. Story after story of intimidation, violence, theft. The evidence piled up until it was undeniable, overwhelming. Shaw was transferred to Denver to await trial. Webb and the others went with him. The properties Shaw had stolen were returned to their original owners, or where the owners were dead, to their surviving families. The legal process was slow and bureaucratic, but it was happening. Justice, creaking forward like a rusty wheel, but forward nonetheless. Mara spent most of those weeks in a daze. Part of her couldn't believe it was over, kept waiting for Shaw to reappear, for the nightmare to start again. But he didn't. The nightmare was done. Elsie came home from Mrs. Chen's boarding house. They settled back into the ranch, started repairing things that had been neglected. The barn, the fence, the house, piece by piece, putting their life back together. One afternoon, about a month after Shaw's arrest, John Carter appeared at Mara's door. He looked thinner, older, but some of the terrible emptiness had left his eyes. "I'm leaving Red Hollow," he said without preamble. "Can't stay here. Too many ghosts." Mara understood. "Where will you go?" "My brother's in Oregon. Got a lumber operation. Says he can use the help." John looked at the horizon. "I need to be somewhere that doesn't smell like smoke every time the wind shifts. I'm sorry, John, for everything." "Don't be. You fought when I wanted to give up. You kept us together. Sarah would have—" His voice caught. "She would have been proud of you." After he left, Mara sat on the porch and cried. For Sarah, for the Carter girls, for all the families that hadn't made it, for all the people Red Hollow had lost. But she also felt something else, something harder to name. Not happiness, exactly, but maybe peace. The kind that comes after a long fight, when you're bruised and exhausted but still standing. Colter stayed in Red Hollow longer than Mara expected. He helped with the repairs around various properties, filed additional documentation with the marshal, testified at preliminary hearings. But Mara knew he was restless. Men like Colter didn't settle. They moved, chasing the next wrong that needed righting. One evening, as summer was starting to soften into autumn, Colter came to Mara's ranch. Elsie was in the barn with Daisy, talking to the cow like she always did. Colter and Mara sat on the porch, watching the sun paint the sky orange and pink. "I'm leaving tomorrow," Colter said. Mara had been expecting it, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. "Where to?" "There's a town up north. Heard some things. Sounds like maybe someone's running the same game Shaw was. Thought I'd check it out." "You're going to do this forever? Chase these men from town to town?" "Until there's none left to chase." Colter leaned back against the porch railing. "Or until I'm too old to ride. Whichever comes first." "That's a lonely way to live." "Yeah, it is." He looked at her. "But someone's got to do it, and I'm already hollowed out. Might as well use what's left for something good." Mara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he deserved more than a life of endless vengeance. But she understood. Some wounds don't heal, they just scar over, and you learn to live with the ache. "Will you come back?" she asked. "After, when you're done up north." "I don't know. Maybe." Colter pulled out his tobacco tin, rolled a cigarette with those practiced movements. "Red Hollow doesn't need me anymore. You got it handled." "It wasn't me. It was all of us. Started with you, though. You stood at that auction and refused to lose everything. That's what sparked it. That's what gave people courage." He lit the cigarette, exhaled smoke. "You're a leader, Mrs. Vale, whether you want to be or not." "I don't feel like a leader. I feel like someone who got lucky and didn't die." "That's what most leaders feel like. The ones worth following, anyway." They sat in companionable silence for a while. The sky darkened. Stars started to appear. "The cow's name was the key, you know," Colter said suddenly. "What?" "Daisy. When you told me her name at the auction, I saw how much you cared. Saw that she wasn't just livestock to you. She was family. And I thought, someone who cares that much about a cow probably deserves a break." He smiled. "Funny how small things change everything. You could have just given me the money. You wouldn't have taken it, but you took the cow back because I bought her fair. Pride's a strange thing." "Yeah," Mara agreed. "It is." Elsie emerged from the barn, saw Colter, and ran over. She'd gotten attached to him over the past weeks, followed him around when he worked, asked him endless questions about his travels. He was patient with her in a way that made Mara's chest ache. "You're leaving, aren't you?" Elsie said. Kids always knew. "Tomorrow morning," Colter confirmed. "Will you come back?" "Maybe." "That's not a real answer." Colter laughed. "You're right. It's not." He crouched down to her level. "How about this? I'll try. That's the best I can promise." Elsie considered this seriously. Then she hugged him, sudden and fierce. Colter stiffened for a moment, then hugged her back. Mara saw his eyes close, saw something like pain cross his face. When Elsie let go, she looked up at him with those two old eyes. "Thank you for helping us. Thank you for buying Daisy." "You're welcome, Miss Elsie." That night, after Elsie was asleep, Mara walked out to the ridge overlooking the valley. The moon was bright enough to see by. She could make out the shapes of other ranches, other properties, lights flickering in windows. Life continuing. Red Hollow had been dying. Shaw had been killing it, slow and methodical. But it wasn't dead now. It was wounded, grieving, but alive. The families that remained were talking about rebuilding, about planting crops for next season, about futures that might actually exist. Mara heard footsteps behind her. Colter joined her on the ridge. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Too much in my head." "Yeah, I know that feeling." They stood side by side looking at the valley. After a while, Colter spoke. "You know what the hardest part is? After something like this, after you win." "What?" "Figuring out what to do next. The fight gives you purpose, direction. When it's over, you're just left, with yourself and all the damage." He was quiet. "I never figured that part out. After Garrison, after my family, I just started chasing the next fight. And the next, because fighting's easier than healing." "Is that advice?" "It's a warning. Don't be like me." He looked at her. "You got a daughter, a home, a community that needs you. Don't waste that chasing ghosts." "I won't," Mara said, and meant it. Colter nodded, seemed satisfied. "Good." He left at dawn, just like he said. Mara and Elsie watched him ride out, the gray horse moving at an easy pace. He didn't look back. Men like Colter never did. Elsie slipped her hand into Mara's. "Do you think we'll see him again?" "I don't know, baby. Maybe." "I hope so. I liked him." "Me too." They went back to the house, back to the work that needed doing, and slowly, day by day, Mara started to understand what Colter had meant about healing being harder than fighting. The nightmares came regularly. Dreams of fire, of Webb's face, of Shaw's cold eyes. Dreams where she didn't pull the trigger fast enough, where Elsie died, where everything fell apart. She'd wake gasping, reaching for the derringer that still lived under her pillow. Some habits were hard to break, but there were good days too. Days where Elsie laughed playing with other children whose families had stayed. Days where Mara's garden started producing again, green shoots pushing up through the dry soil. Days where she sat on the porch with a cup of terrible coffee and felt something like contentment. About 3 months after Shaw's arrest, word came that he'd been tried and convicted. Federal judge. Guilty on all counts. Life in prison, no possibility of parole. Webb and the others got similar sentences. Sheriff Drummond got 10 years for corruption and accessory charges. Red Hollow celebrated quietly. No big party. Just a collective exhale. Relief that justice had actually happened. The town elected a new sheriff. Danny Fletcher's father, a man who'd lost his land to Shaw years before and understood what it meant to serve rather than take. The town council was reorganized. New faces, people who'd stood up during the fight. Mara was asked to join the council. She refused. She'd done her part. Led when leading was necessary. But she wasn't a politician. Wasn't someone who wanted power. She just wanted to raise her daughter and work her land and not be afraid anymore. Spring came. With it, rain. Real rain. The kind that soaked into the ground instead of evaporating. Creeks that had been dry for years started flowing. Grass grew green. The valley transformed from brown and dying to something alive. Mara planted a garden. Vegetables mostly. But also flowers. Wildflowers that Sarah Carter had once mentioned loving. A small memorial. A way of remembering. Elsie turned 9. They had a small party. Just a few neighbor children and some cake Mara had managed to bake without burning. Elsie blew out the candles and made a wish she wouldn't tell anyone. Later, Mara asked what she'd wished for. "For you to smile more," Elsie said. "You don't smile enough." The observation hurt. But it was true. Mara had been so focused on surviving, on fighting, on just getting through each day that she'd forgotten how to find joy. She made a conscious effort after that, smiled at small things. Elsie's laughter, the way Daisy nuzzled her hand looking for treats, the sunset, the rain, the simple fact of being alive. It was harder than fighting had been. But maybe that was the point. One afternoon, about a year after Shaw's arrest, a rider came up the road to Mara's property. For a moment, her hand went to where the derringer used to be. She'd finally stopped carrying it a few months back. Then she recognized the horse. Colter Ridge looked older, more weathered, but his eyes were the same, that pale, sharp blue. "Mr. Ridge," Mara said from the porch, trying to keep her voice casual, failing. "Mrs. Vale?" He dismounted, tied the gray. Thought I'd check in, see how things turned out. We're still here. That's something. That's everything. Elsie came running from the barn, shrieking his name. Colter caught her when she launched herself at him, swung her around once before setting her down. You came back, Elsie said. You actually came back. Said I'd try. How long are you staying? Colter glanced at Mara. Something in his expression made her breath catch. That depends. Over dinner, nothing fancy, just stew and bread. Colter told them about the town up north, how he'd found another operation similar to Shaw's, how he'd spent months gathering evidence, organizing resistance, bringing in federal authorities, how they'd won, but it had been bloody. 2 people killed, more wounded, including Colter, who'd taken a bullet in the shoulder that still ached when it rained. I kept thinking about what you said, he told Mara after Elsie had gone to bed. They sat on the porch, the familiar spot. About it being a lonely way to live. And you were right. It is, and I'm tired. Not tired of fighting, just tired of fighting alone. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe I'm done chasing. Maybe it's time to... He struggled for words. Plant roots. Try healing instead of just hunting. Mara's heart was beating too fast. Here? In Red Hollow? If you'd have me, I could work. I'm good with horses, good with repairs. I don't need much, just a place to try being something other than angry. Colter. You don't have to answer now. I know it's sudden. I know I'm probably a poor prospect, damaged goods, but I thought maybe damaged people understand each other better than whole ones. Mara looked at him. Really looked at him. Saw the scars and the grief and the bone-deep weariness. Saw a man who'd spent years trying to make up for what he'd lost. Saw someone who understood what it cost to keep standing when everything wanted you to fall. You're not damaged, she said quietly. You're just hurt. There's a difference. Yeah? Yeah. She reached out, took his hand. It was warm, calloused, real. And yeah, you can stay, if you want. We could use the help around here. Something in Colter's face relaxed. Relief, maybe. Or hope. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You haven't dealt with Elsie when she's in a mood. She gets that from her father. Colter laughed. The sound was rusty, but genuine. I'll risk it. They sat in silence for a while. Comfortable silence. The kind that comes when you don't need words to fill space. You know what I realized, Mara said eventually. Fighting Shaw, organizing everyone, standing up. It was the scariest thing I've ever done. But it was also the most alive I've felt since Thomas died. Like I'd been sleepwalking and suddenly woke up. That's what fighting does. Strips away everything except what matters. But you can't fight forever. Eventually, you have to figure out how to live. Yeah, Colter squeezed her hand. I'm working on that part. Me too. Time passed. Seasons changed. Colter stayed. He built a small cabin on the edge of Mara's property. His own space, but close. He worked with the horses, helped repair fences, taught Elsie to ride properly. Slowly, carefully, became part of the fabric of their lives. It wasn't romance. Not at first. It was something slower, deeper. 2 people who'd lost everything learning how to build something new from the wreckage. Some days were easy, some were hard. There were arguments, moments of frustration, nights when the nightmares came back and Mara couldn't sleep, nights when Colter woke screaming from dreams of Garrison. But there were good days, too. More and more of them as months turned into years. Days where Elsie raced her horse against Colter's gray and won. Days where Mara's garden produced enough vegetables to share with neighbors. Days where the 3 of them sat on the porch and watched the sunset and nobody needed to say anything. Red Hollow healed. It wasn't fast. It wasn't perfect. Some families never recovered from what Shaw had done. Some left anyway, unable to stay in a place that held so much pain. But others stayed. Rebuilt. Newcomers arrived, drawn by cheap land and the promise of community. The town grew, changed, became something different than it had been. Mara became a kind of unofficial leader despite her best efforts. People came to her with problems, asked her advice. Looked to her as an example of someone who'd stood up and survived. She tried to pass the credit to others, to Colter, to the families who'd risked everything, to John Carter's memory. But people saw what they saw. Eventually, she accepted it. Not as a burden, just as a responsibility. One more thing that needed doing. On the second anniversary of Shaw's arrest, the town held a memorial service for those who'd been lost. Sarah Carter and her daughters, the Harrisons, the Boones, all the families across all the towns Shaw had destroyed, names read aloud, stones placed in the town cemetery, even though there were no bodies to bury. Mara stood with Elsie on one side and Colter on the other, listening to the names. So many names, each one a life stolen, each one a future erased. When it was over, when people started dispersing, Elsie looked up at her mother. "Mama? Was it worth it? All the fighting, all the scary parts, was it worth it to win?" Mara thought about it. Thought about Sarah Carter, who'd never see her daughters grow up. About John Carter, alone in Oregon with his ghosts. About all the people who'd paid prices they shouldn't have had to pay. "I don't know if worth it is the right question," she said finally. "We did what we had to do, what needed doing, and we survived. Some of us, anyway. That's all we can ask for." "Do you think Mr. Shaw thinks about us?" Elsie asked. "In prison? Do you think he thinks about what he did?" "I don't know. Maybe. Probably not." Mara looked at her daughter. "But we're not fighting for him anymore. We're not trying to make him sorry or make him pay. That's done. Now we're just living, building. That's the real victory. Not beating him, but building something better than what he tried to destroy." Elsie nodded slowly. "I think I understand." They walked home together, the three of them. A widow who'd found her strength. A cowboy who'd found his peace. A girl who was learning that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to keep going anyway. As they crested the ridge overlooking the valley, Mara paused. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. She could see other ranches, other families, smoke rising from chimneys, animals in pastures, life continuing in all its messy, imperfect glory. Daisy was grazing near the fence line, peaceful and content. The cow who'd started everything, who'd been worth $20 and a stranger's kindness, who'd become a symbol of something larger than herself. "Thank you," Mara said quietly. Not to anyone in particular, just to the universe, to the day, to whatever fortune had brought them through. Colter's hand found hers. "For what?" "For this. For being here. For not giving up." "Could say the same to you." Elsie ran ahead, calling back to them to hurry up. Dinner wouldn't cook itself. Mara and Colter followed, slower, in no rush. They had time. They had each other. They had a future that was uncertain but possible. And in a land hardened by drought and greed and violence, that was enough. More than enough. Because the truth Mara had learned, the lesson written in ash and blood and survival, was simple. People were stronger together than fear could make them weak. Communities built on honesty were harder to break than empires built on lies. And sometimes the most revolutionary act wasn't fighting back. It was refusing to disappear, refusing to be erased, refusing to let cruelty become normal. Red Hollow hadn't been saved by one person. It had been saved by everyone who'd decided that enough was enough. By ordinary people making extraordinary choices. By the simple decision to stand together when standing alone had failed. That was the story Mara would tell Elsie as she grew. Not a story about heroes and villains, but a story about neighbors and community, about the quiet courage it takes to keep going when everything says stop, about the strength found not in violence, but in the choice to protect what matters. Years later, when Elsie was grown and had children of her own, she'd tell them about the drought years, about the man who bought a cow and gave it back, about her mother who'd been too stubborn to surrender, about a town that had been dying and chose to live instead. She'd point to the old barn, still standing after all those years, to the fence line her mother and Colter had built together, to the garden that still bloomed every spring. And she'd tell her children what her mother had told her, that the world is full of people who take. But every once in a while you meet someone who gives instead. And sometimes that single act of kindness is enough to change everything. Daisy the cow lived to be 17 years old. When she finally died, peacefully in her sleep, they buried her in the pasture and planted a tree over the grave. It grew tall and strong, and in summer it provided shade for the new calves that grazed beneath it. Mara lived to see Elsie married, to hold her grandchildren, to watch Red Hollow transform into something vibrant and alive. Colter stayed by her side through all of it, the angry cowboy becoming a respected member of the community. They never formally married. Neither saw the need. They were already family in all the ways that mattered. On quiet evenings, when the work was done and the valley was settling into dusk, Mara would sit on the porch and remember. The auction yard, the fear, the fights, the losses. And she'd think about how strange it was that the worst period of her life had also been the most important, the time when she'd discovered who she really was beneath the fear and grief. She'd learned that strength wasn't something you had. It was something you chose. Every day, every moment, even when choosing felt impossible. And she'd learned that kindness, real kindness, the kind that costs you something, could change the world. One cow, one choice, one moment of unexpected grace. That was enough to start a revolution. That was enough to save a town. That was enough to prove that in the end, courage was always stronger than fear.